The boy stood up on the chair. He wanted to see what was on the table. The boy saw that there was a vase of plants and a plate on the table. The child went to his grandfather. He sat in lotus posture on the opposite side. The boy said that the offerings had disappeared again and so had the sweets. He asked that someone had taken them. The grandfather replied to Minato that everything was correct. Grandpa stroked the boy's head. He said that a spirit had inhabited their house. Grandpa continued that he wasn't bad, even good. Grandpa admonished Minato not to be mad at the spirit for taking the candy. He added that he should have been generous. Minato asked Grandpa that he had seen the spirit and the dwarves too. Grandpa replied that they were friends of the spirit. Grandpa smiled. He continued that it seemed Minato had only seen good spirits. Before he died, Grandpa told Minato that there were more than just humans living in the world, and it was true that they were always around. The weather was nice outside. A car drove by nearby. A young man sat not far from the road. The car stopped next to him. The hero was looking at a piece of paper, but he noticed it. The driver called out to him. He asked the young man what was wrong and why he was sitting there. The hero asked the driver if he could help him. The young man showed the driver a piece of paper that had a small map of the area. The hero sat in the car. The driver asked him that he had followed this strange map. The young man tried to justify that he thought he could walk, but he lost his way and waited an hour for someone to pass. The driver smiled. He replied that it was a village, after all. The man told the young man that he was young, the phone could have been reached. The hero replied that it was easier for him when important information was written on paper. The driver told him that he was funny. The man added that that was why he was lost. The driver continued that there was a nice black house here. He added that there was no need to worry because he would drive the young man to it. They drove down the deserted road. The hero looked out the window. The roof of a house showed in the distance. The house, located in a village in the middle of the mountains, was built by a distant relative of the hero. This relative died long ago, and there was no one to buy the house, so this house stood for 2 years. The driver dropped off the hero. The young man looked at the house. He asked himself what it was here. The hero noticed black smoke. The young man turned to the driver. He asked why there was black smoke coming out of the house. The driver asked him that he was joking. The man added that he was being funny. The hero asked himself that there was no smoke. The driver asked that he was here to stay. The young man answered in the affirmative. He said he was going to be here as a temporary resident. The male asked if he would be okay on his own. The driver continued that he was running a convenience store here. He suggested to the young man that if he felt lonely, he could stop by there. The hero said he would draw a map so he wouldn't get lost again. The driver replied that he should have used his cell phone. The man drove off. The young man looked at the house. It was his home now, he thought. The young man's name was Minato Kusunoki. He was 24 years old. Minato worked at the hot springs inn that was the family business. He was the second son. One day his family decided he had to move out and recommended this house to him. Minato thought it didn't feel like a blessing. The smoke was stirring, he thought. The young man asked himself what it was. He grabbed the doorknob, but didn't hide the map of the area just yet. Minato was electrocuted. He screamed in pain. The entire contents of his hand fell to the ground. The young man looked at his hand. He asked himself if it was static electricity. Minato picked up his piece of paper. There was no trace of ink on the paper. The young man thought that the ink was disappearing. Minato looked and noticed that the smoke was gone as well. He asked himself how that happened. The young man decided that he should have gone in first. It seemed to the hero that the deceased wanted to live out the rest of his years here. Minato went in. He noticed that the materials for the house had been carefully chosen. Everything in the house was almost new. The owner of the house had passed away almost immediately after the construction was completed. He hadn't lived here for more than a month at most. Minato thought it would be unbearable to see it rot. The young man put his hands together. He gave thanks for being entrusted with the house. The hero thought it was his place. Minato walked out to the backyard. He marveled at the size of the garden. The young man remembered being told that the Chad was watched over, but here it was overgrown. He crossed his arms over his chest. The hero said the garden could be taken care of later, but there were things to do first. Minato was about to pull out a notepad from his pants pocket. The young man pulled out the notepad and started leafing through it. He wrote down that first he needed to dry the futon after cleaning it. Next, he needed to go shopping. Minato figured there was rice for dinner. He was looking forward to that. He wrote down that he also needed detergent. The hero tore that page out of his notebook and hung it on the refrigerator. He said he needed laundry. Minato told himself that he needed to change his clothes first. He had long been in the habit of taking notes. The hero always had a pen and notepad handy. Tomorrow's plans, shopping lists, and messages to his family. Minato wrote down everything important and even completely incoherent things. He was used to making notes whenever he noticed something new. He was often told to use his cell phone. The hero asked himself that since the notebook was designed for taking notes, why not use it? It remained a mystery to him. Minato hung another sheet on the door and removed himself from the room. The hero cleaned the house. He cooked his own food, then mopped the floors. At the end of the cleaning, the house glistened. Minato put his hands on his hips. It felt really good, he said. Minato thought that the past owner must have felt good after the cleaning too. The hero said he was very tired. He added that he had spent 2 days cleaning. Minato was lying on his bed. He noticed that the place was so quiet. Minato was sleeping. White smoke appeared. The hero turned around and ducked into his pillow. Minato thought, he's definitely not going to sleep. His body was whimpering in pain. The young man got up to get a drink of water. He reached the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. The hero noticed a note on the countertop. He picked up the note in his hands. Minato thought that the writing on yesterday's note was disappearing. Hero thought it was just like yesterday. His attention was caught by something. Someone called out to Minato. The voice told Minato that since he wasn't worried, there was no reason for him to worry either. The voice continued that he wanted to tell him something. He said that from time to time, this house had potential buyers, but they turned it down once they looked at the house. The voice wanted to say something else. Minato interrupted him, saying that was why he had a fluttering reputation. The hero looked at the note again. Minato remembered his mom saying that. It was creepy when the writing disappeared. The hero asked himself what it said. He thought that maybe he should have put up a calendar. The car horn sounded. Minato wondered if the gardener had arrived yet. 2 trucks stopped outside the house. Workers were unloading tools. Minato exhaled a breath. The gardener said he was finished faster than he thought. Minato brought out a tray of tea. He replied that it really was like that. The hero continued that he didn't expect them to be done before lunch. He thanked them for their work. Minato gave the cup of tea to the gardener, and the gardener thanked him. The gardener said he was surprised when he got the request. He added that he didn't think he would make it to this garden. Minato asked the gardener that his father wanted to grow a garden here. The gardener replied that he had lost interest halfway through. The man added that he figured it was all for nothing. Minato thought that he had no choice but to give up his ambition. He thought, then it wasn't just because the previous owner of this house had suddenly passed away. The hero told himself that his father had also passed away at this time. Minato asked himself what feelings the gardener came to this garden with. The gardener finished his drink. The man asked what he was going to do with this garden. The gardener explained that he had helped here, but if it was left like this, it would be empty. Minato said that was right. The hero continued that he was here temporarily, so he couldn't personally decide. The gardener said that was how it was. He cried out in pain. Minato asked that he was okay. The gardener said that he was fine. He continued that he felt a little sick. The man added that he was probably tired. Minato saw the gardener off. He said he would ask the homeowner about the garden. The hero started taking notes in his notebook. He said he thought he shouldn't have left it like that either. The wind tore a leaf from his notebook. The sheet touched the gardener's neck. Minato reached out to grab the sheet. The note fell to the ground. Minato crouched down to pick it up. He asked for forgiveness. The gardener touched his shoulders. He said he shouldn't have. The hero looked at him. Minato asked something was wrong. The gardener started to move his arms. He replied that his shoulders felt so light. The man said that before they felt so heavy and hurt. Minato asked him what he meant. The hero asked that since the pain was gone, wasn't it for the best? A light-colored animal figure appeared. The spirit asked that he hadn't seen any evil beings. The spirit continued that he was able to cast out the evil spirit that was on that man. The spirit thought that was interesting. Minato was standing in the kitchen. On the countertop was a packet of instant noodles. The hero was looking at a piece of paper. Minato told himself that the writing was missing again. He asked himself what happened when the gardener touched it. Hero thought that it had never happened before the move, which was already a problem. The kettle boiled. Minato turned off the stove. The young man asked that maybe a mysterious force was erasing his inscriptions. Someone answered him that he wasn't wrong about the force. Minato said that they should have changed the paper and pens then. The voice replied that there was no point in changing them. The hero opened a package of noodles. Minato asked why the text was disappearing then. He poured boiling water over the noodles. The voice replied that his notes were being driven away from evil spirits. The hero interjected that he was talking about evil spirits. Minato looked to the side. He saw a light-colored animal. The spirit replied that the master's writings were casting out evil spirits. The hero asked again what he meant. The spirit smiled weakly. Minato asked that he was a dog. The spirit replied that it was rude. He continued that he was a mountain god. the spirit began to make sounds. Minato asked himself that a god of the mountains had come into the house. Minato prepared meat for the guests. The spirit tasted the food. Minato asked him if he liked it. The spirit replied that it was a little greasy, but it wasn't bad. Minato sat next to him. He asked that maybe he wanted some water. The spirit's name was Yamagami-san. Minato asked that he was the god of the local mountains. The spirit answered in the affirmative. Minato said that he needed to prepare some offerings then. He continued that tomorrow he would go out and buy some. The hero asked the spirit what he liked. The spirit was silent. He told Minato that he wasn't scared at all. The god added that he expected a completely different reaction. The spirit imagined that Minato was scared of him. The hero apologized to him. The spirit continued that he was glad when the Lord saved him. The Lord said that he wished he could return the favor. He suggested that Minato make a wish. The spirit added that he would fulfill it. Minato asked him again. He replied that he didn't really need anything. The hero hesitated for a moment. The spirit replied that it was very boring. Minato said that he didn't even know. The spirit replied that he already did. The spirit continued that if the Lord hadn't banished the evil spirits, things would have ended badly for him. He added that maybe someday he too would be consumed and become an evil spirit. Minato said that even if his inscriptions did cast out such horrible creatures, it was an accident. The spirit asked that he still didn't believe that. The hero answered in the negative. He said that, on the contrary, it explained a lot. Minato looked at his notebook. He added that that was why the inscriptions had disappeared. The spirit replied that, by the way, the inscriptions would now continue to disappear. Minato asked him again. The god grimaced. Minato asked him what had happened to him. The spirit repeated a word similar to water. The hero understood him and asked him what he meant by water. The god stuck out his tongue. The young man looked at the bottle. Minato read on the bottle that it was soda. He thought that the spirit's tongue must have gone numb. The hero asked mentally that he was okay. Minato thought it looked funny. The spirit dipped his tongue in a saucer of water. He said his tongue felt a little numb, but it wasn't that bad. Minato thought he was starting to get used to it. God said, "What about the inscriptions?" He continued that they would disappear until the Lord stopped casting out evil spirits. The hero thought he was getting used to it. Minato asked if that was true. Minato scratched the back of his head. The hero continued that it was kind of embarrassing. The spirit asked him not to say that. He said that it was a very rare gift. The god added that if he honed it, he would gain even more power. The spirit said they had dealt with that. He dragged the bowl over to Minato. The god exclaimed, demanding more. The hero poured another drink. Minato asked why his inscriptions had such power. He explained that he wasn't good at calligraphy and that he wasn't good at any particular letters. The spirit replied that he didn't know why. He said he didn't understand human beauty, ugliness, and strength, but he could tell that the Lord's inscriptions were not bad. The spirit finished drinking and lay down. He told Minato that he could be proud of himself. The hero thanked the spirit. He mentally told the spirit how much he had been drinking. Minato said there used to be a person who praised him like that. He remembered his grandfather. Grandpa had said then that it was great and it turned out really well. He asked Minato that he had done it himself. They were at the hot springs then. Grandpa asked him that maybe he would make one for him too. Minato continued to tell him, but suddenly he screamed. The spirit was startled. Minato quickly got up. He said he had completely forgotten. The god asked what had happened. He told Minato that he had made a lot of noise. The hero brought out the planks. He explained that he wanted to attach, albeit temporarily, but let them hang. The spirit asked what it was. Minato turned the plaque around. He replied that it was a nameplate. The hero added that he had made it himself. He explained that in junior high school he was given a homework assignment to make a plaque for therein. Minato continued that his father had decorated the main gate with it. The young man said that he thought it was clumsy, so he was ashamed of it. His father then said that the guests liked the plaque. He added that they shouldn't have taken it down, and it was better to make one for their house. Minato said that he was straight up surprised when he said he would pay money for it. The character went on to say that since then he had gotten into the habit of making signs for their house. He had gotten better at it over time. The spirit thought for a moment. He thought that it was probably because he could see them. The god looked at the plaque. Minato suggested attaching them. The hero pinned the plaque to the wall. Minato said it came out pretty good. The spirit stood nearby. The god felt an incredible power emanating from that plaque. He couldn't even imagine it. The spirit looked at the plaque. He asked himself what was going to happen. A magic cube began to appear around the house. Spirit sensed it. He asked himself that Minato had put up a barrier. The god thought it was magnificent. He knew that this way evil spirits wouldn't be able to get near the area. The spirit looked at Minato. It seemed to him that the young man didn't see it. The hero said it was as if he had just gotten the feeling that he really did live here. He went on to say that he had recently said that he had nothing to ask for. The spirit looked at him. Minato said he wanted to look at this careless garden and live in peace. He looked at the god. The hero added that he had thought of that wish just now. The young man said it would be nice to have a good companion around. The spirit was surprised. The god hesitated for a moment. He replied that he shouldn't have been so disinterested. Minato asked that he really thought that. He said he really wanted such a thing. They were walking somewhere. Minato wanted to say something to the god. The hero told Yamagami-sen that lately his divinity was coming out of every crevice. The god rejoiced. He had a plate of food in front of him. He replied that it was because the Lord was honoring him. Minato said that was what it was about. The spirit continued that his power depended on it. Minato folded his arms. He said he would pray more then. The hero thanked Yamagami-san for always being there for him. The god began to glow with joy. Minato noticed this. The hero kept calling the god by name. The spirit felt very good. He said it felt great. Minato covered his face with his hands. He screamed, which was very bright, it was blinding. God was glowing. Minato said they overdid it. The hero added that his eyes almost burned. The god looked guilty. It was quiet outside. The creature broke the window and ran away. A man shouted that it had escaped into the street. The young man climbed out of the window. He shouted that he was coming after it. The man called his name. The boy's name was Harima. Harima ran. He thought it was bad that he had managed to escape, but it was good that no one was here. The guy knew he had to kill this spirit faster. His attention was caught by something. Standing in Harima's path was Minato. The evil spirit had almost reached the hero. Harima thought that he wouldn't be able to catch up to him in time. He folded his hands in front of him and applied the seal. The evil spirit wanted to possess Minato. The young man's aura pushed it away. Harima was surprised. Minato looked at his notes. The ink was gone again. He asked as they disappeared again. The hero asked what exactly now. He asked himself what he was supposed to do now. Harima stood there puzzled. He apologized. Minato said that he had recently moved to this city. He asked that this shopping district was always so deserted. The young man added that the shutters of all the stores were closed. Harima tried to explain himself. Harima asked himself what had just happened. He replied that this was an old neighborhood and there were no stores here. He corrected his glasses with his index finger. Harima continued that the new one was behind the main street. He added that that was probably where he originally wanted to go. Minato said that was how it was. He added that he should have explored the area better. He thanked the stranger for the clarification. The hero continued that he would like to ask him one thing. By the way, Harima asked what it was. Minato crossed his arms over his chest. He asked the stranger what he himself was going to buy in the shopping district. Harima was surprised. He replied that it was probably alcohol or candy. Harima thought that he was a block man. Minato repeated the stranger's answer. He said that there was no way he could remember that item. The hero went on to say that it seemed like it was an essential item and needed to be used once a week. Minato was desperate. Harima said that maybe they were garbage bags. Minato shouted that was correct. Minato told the stranger that the stranger had helped him a lot. He thanked him. The hero said goodbye and left. Harima's comrade came running in. He called out for Harima. The comrade asked if he was alright. Harima addressed the comrade by name. His name was Onmyoji. Harima said that they would have needed 3 guys to catch the evil spirit and they still missed him. He asked his comrade if he thought an ordinary man could banish the evil spirit in a flash. Onmyoji looked at him with a questioning look. Harima continued to stare after Minato. Minato shouted that he was already home. The hero called out to Yamagami-san, asking if he was here. He said that he had bought everything. Minato added that they had steamed buns today. The young man looked in the courtyard, but there was no spirit. The garden had changed during his absence. Minato looked around, but the mountain god was nowhere to be found. He admired the garden. The hero thought the garden was very beautiful. Minato asked himself what had happened to the garden during his absence. The young man called out for Mr. Yamagami. Groundhogs came out of the bushes. There were 3 of them. Minato asked that Mr. Yamagami had now become a thief. The spirit replied that he didn't do it. The god replied that these guys were his children. Minato called out to the spirit. He looked at him. The hero said that he had shrunk. The spirit replied positively. These spirits' names were Usagi, Torika, and Seri. Usagi said that the mountain god put a lot of effort into this garden. Torika asked that it really became beautiful, didn't it? Seri said something smelled good. Minato asked that was how Yamagami-san did it. The god answered in the affirmative. One of the marmots said that they were helping too. Another added that they were mostly supportive. Minato asked again. The god justified that they were still just kids. Minato figured he had a gardening permit, so there wouldn't be any problems. He thought he wanted to order a gardener, but he never expected something like this could happen. The hero realized that this was a godsend, so it was worth accepting it gratefully. Minato thanked Yamagami for his work. Minato said he had some steamed pattas. He asked the god if he would have one of those. The spirit shouted that he would. One of the marmots screamed at Usagi, trying to quiet the one. Usagi was drooling. He said Minato smelled really good, it was a sweet flavor. One of the groundhogs said he shouldn't have impersonated him. Minato asked the groundhog that he wanted to taste it. The hero said it was a Western cassella sweetness. He continued that there were also Japanese sweets. The groundhog exclaimed that the cassella was wonderful. The young man held out the treat to the god. The spirit said the children wouldn't understand it. Minato said the others could join in too. One of the marmots asked if he was sure. Minato answered in the affirmative. He said the food tasted better when eaten with company. The groundhog said that since it was like that, Minato's new friends ate with great gusto. Minato turned to Yamagami. He asked that these children were his. The god paused. He answered in the affirmative. Yamagami said that children were usually born. He continued that unlike those who were capable of producing offspring, he could simply create an alter ego. The spirit added that, in other words, they were his children. The marmots rushed at the god. Minato thought that children were indeed difficult to raise. Yamagami said that these kids seemed to like him. The spirit added that they were so rowdy, so he wished the young man would have followed them. Minato questioned him back. Yamagami explained that he was kind of still a kid too, and he was in trouble. The hero thought that maybe it was because Yamagami was lonely. Minato agreed. He said that he liked it. Hiro added that they had a big garden, so it wouldn't be any kind of problem. Minato looked at the groundhogs. He continued that he didn't mind if they stayed. The hero added that they could enjoy the sweets. The marmots got excited. One of them laughed. He replied that it couldn't be helped if he said so. Another jumped and shouted the word Casella. God said that there was such a thing as that too. It was night in the courtyard. The moon was shining brightly. The marmots and the god were asleep and Minato was watching. He said it was very cute. Yamagami's ears straightened. He woke up. Minato called out to him. Yamagami said someone had visited them. He was serious. There was a young man standing at the gate of the house. It was Harima. He felt uneasy. The boy asked himself what this sacred place was. Seiga Harima was 27 years old. He came from a family that had been practicing Amioto for generations. His family made their living by exorcising spirits. He was one of the talented Amioto due to his lineage and efforts. One had to maintain dignity in any situation. Harima was nervous. Harima was scared. He asked himself what this place was. The guy was standing in front of the gate. Under this pressure, his legs were trembling. Harima wanted to leave right now. The guy fixed his glasses. He realized he couldn't go home. Harima reached out his hand for the doorbell. Minato opened the door. He said hello to the guest. Harima asked who was there. Minato recognized the kind stranger. Harima was uncomfortable. Minato asked if he would like to come in. They walked to the garden. Minato asked Harima to sit down. The boy felt uncomfortable. Harima asked himself what kind of place this was. Minato brought drinks. Harima noticed that this garden held some special power. He asked himself who this young man even was. Minato held out a sweet. He said it was for tea. Yamagami looked at the guest with a fierce gaze. Minato asked the guest how he knew where he lived. Harima tried to explain himself. He said he wanted to ask him something. The guy added that he had been asked to find out about it. Minato was surprised. He asked what he had. Harima introduced himself. He said he was an Amioto. Minato nodded. He said his name was Minato Kusunoki. The hero asked himself that the Amioto was a monk. Harima fixed his glasses. He told Minato that he had exorcised a vengeful spirit in the shopping district today. The hero remembered their first meeting. The young man asked that he had done it. Harima asked himself that, didn't he feel it? He continued that the spirits showed up and they were short-handed. The guest continued that he was already capable of destroying them. He added that few humans were capable of doing so. Minato was surprised. He wanted to say something, but Harima didn't let him get a word in. The guest continued that he thought he had not seen vengeful spirits, but he could cast them out. He asked Minato if he knew what that power was. Minato replied that perhaps his notes had helped with that. Harima asked what he meant by that. He asked Minato to give him that amulet. In the hero's hands was a notebook. Harima continued that he was willing to pay for it. Minato tried to stop him. Harima thanked him for listening to a stranger. He said he knew it wasn't exactly an amulet, but he had to get it. Minato said it was just a memo. Harima said he didn't have much money with him. He added that he promised to pay the rest later. He held out the money to Minato. The hero started laughing nervously. Harisa shouted that he just had to name a price. Minato was nervous. He yelled that he needed to calm down. Minato said it was really just a shopping memo. Harima's face changed. He asked what it meant. Minato scratched his head. He continued that it was a shopping memo. The hero added that he figured such a thing wouldn't be worth 1 yen. Harima was disappointed. He asked himself that his great power was contained in the shopping memo. Minato asked him if he was okay. The spirit said it was weird to call it a talisman. God said he should have just written it again. Harima's face changed. Minato turned to Yamagami. God replied that the guest hadn't seen him. Harima thought he felt someone else's presence. Harima had felt someone else's presence when he walked in here. He looked behind Minato. Harima asked himself that gods lived in this house. The spirit continued, telling Minato that if he wrote from his heart, it could be something of value to him. He lay down. Yamagami added that there was no reason to refuse him. Minato knew the spirit was right. He thought it was some kind of insanity. Minato said that was how things were. Harima was nervous. Minato told him he would try his best. The young man was serious. The marmots were sleeping sweetly. Minato flipped over a sheet of notepaper. Harima asked himself if those words had exorcised a vengeful spirit. The guest realized that this story was very confusing. Harima took the teacup in his hands. He wondered what words this guy would write. God was dictating to Minato what should have been written. Yamagami was talking about chestnut manju, imagaweaki dumplings, sakuramachi. Harima choked on his tea. The guest looked at the memo. He realized that there were only Japanese sweets and this memo was for shopping. Tea was pouring out of his open mouth. Minato felt sick to his stomach. He rubbed his eyes. The hero said he suddenly felt sleepy. The god said it was very exhausting, so it was worth stopping for now. Minato apologized. He said he was a little tired. The hero handed back the sheet. He continued that it wasn't much. Harima took the sheet. He thought it was incredible since the leaf radiated power. Harima wondered if an experienced Omiauji could create such a talisman. The guest said it was enough. He thanked Minato. Harima thanked Minato once more. He looked at the young man, but he was not feeling well. Harima handed Minato a stack of money. The hero and the god looked at the money. They were dumbfounded. Minato asked his guest what it was. Harima said that he had told him before. He added that he would give the rest of it later. The guest yelled that he had to go. Minato said that it was a lot. He added that it was just a memo. Harima replied that it was a reasonable price. Minato said he couldn't accept it. Harima said he should have just taken it. Minato yelled that there was a lot there. The spirit told him that the man wouldn't leave until he accepted the money. Minato replied that he understood. Harima wanted to say something. Minato said he would accept the money. He asked the guest to wait. The hero said he would be back soon. He ran into the house. The young man asked Harima not to leave. Minato apologized for keeping him waiting. He asked the guest to give him a hand. The hero opened the marker. Harima obediently extended his hand. Minato drew a star on the back of his palm. Harima said it was a pentagram. Minato replied that he had gotten so much that he couldn't care less. Minato continued that he wondered what else he could offer. He asked that, referring to the Omiauji, it was something like that. Harima was surprised. He fixed his glasses and answered in the negative. Harima thanked the young man once more. He was about to leave. For a moment, he stopped. Harima looked at his hand. Harima thought that Minato Kusunoki was a very mysterious man. He realized that despite having such abilities, he knew nothing about spirits and was indifferent. Harima adjusted his glasses again. It was a pentagram of exile, he thought. Harima called out to someone. He said hello. The guy apologized, but added that he would be there soon. Harima said home. It wasn't a long detour. Minato looked anxiously at the account book. He shouted that he had no money. God and his children looked at the hero. The marmots continued to eat the treats. The mountain spirit had a big appetite and Minato wanted to make him happy, so he bought expensive sweets every day. The hero thought that soon the money would run out. He, as a manager, wasn't getting paid enough. Minato thought that it looked like it was necessary to spend his savings. The hero didn't want to spend the money he got from Harima-san. One of the groundhogs asked Minato that he didn't have any money. Another said that it was probably their fault. Yamagami said that there was no need to sacrifice himself to make offerings to them. Minato replied that it wasn't like that. He said that he was doing what he wanted to do. The hero added that, after all, he would want the god to eat good food. The young man recalled that in addition, when he served the god cheap sweets, he immediately became discouraged. Minato thought that it seemed that he wasn't comfortable eating such things. The hero stood up. He exclaimed that it had been decided. Minato clenched his hand into a fist. He suggested that they get jobs. Hero asked himself that even though he had stated it so forcefully, where was he supposed to look for a job? He thought he would find a job on the new shopping street. Minato was desperate. The young man was asking himself what he should do. Minato's attention was caught by a stand labeled Japanese sweets. The hero thought it was better to buy something for Yamagami and the others. He walked into the establishment. Someone called out to him, calling him the man with the notepad. It was the driver who had dropped him off. The man asked that he had come here for shopping. The driver added that he was still holding his notepad. Minato called the man a savior. The man didn't understand what he meant. The man replied that he couldn't believe it. He continued that Minato was suddenly looking for a job in the countryside. The hero replied in the affirmative. The man asked that it wasn't his brother who had come here for work. He crossed his arms over his chest. The man asked that he was the one who lived in that house. Minato replied that he had, but recently his expenses had started to rise. The man said that it seemed rather wasteful. He asked the hero about buying a car or something. The man explained that when you're young you want to drive a new car, and he used to be like that too. Minato thought that he couldn't say that he was buying candy for a god. The man continued that he couldn't help it. He added that he was sure the hero could handle all of his difficulties. The man said that he felt something special from him. Minato asked him if that was appropriate. The man started to laugh. He asked what wasn't. Minato walked down the street. He thought that it was hard to find a job. The hero thought then there was nothing that could be done, so he had to cut down on the amount of sweets this month. The young man thought that he should have looked for a job on the internet. A pebble flew in front of his foot. It caught his attention. Minato looked at the ground. Minato ran into the house. He called out to Yamagami. The hero asked that there was someone divine in front of the gate. He asked the god that it was also his relative. Yamagami answered in the negative. He said it was the spirit of a turtle. Minato interjected. The marmosets ran over to Minato and started hugging him. Yamagami said that the turtle spirit was saying that the hero had saved him. Minato countered that he didn't remember that. He looked at the turtle. Yamagami said his body was taken over by a vengeful spirit in the shopping district, but the owner of the note destroyed it. The hero shouted that he remembered. Yamagami continued that the turtle said he had come to worship the savior and also to give him a seed. Minato asked what the seed was. The hero showed the seed in the palm of his hand. He asked the god what he said about it. Yamagami said it was better to plant it in the garden. The turtle said he also liked the garden. The spirit of the turtle climbed up on the rock. He added that he wanted to live here. The turtle asked that everything was okay. Yamagami replied that this garden belonged to the Lord, so he couldn't make the decision for him. Minato said he was fine with that. The turtle spirit jumped into the pond. Minato asked him what the seed was and where it was to be planted. The turtle replied that something pretty big was supposed to grow out of it. He added that he was looking forward to it. Yamagami put his paw back in place. He suggested planting a seed in that spot. Yamagami started digging with his paw at the spot. He said that was probably enough. Minato mentally called the god Doggy and told him to dig. The hero planted a seed in that hole. He told the seed that it grew strong and healthy. One of the groundhogs said hello to Minato. He asked the hero if he had found a job. The young man exhaled desperately. He replied that unfortunately he was unable to find one. The other groundhog asked if he was okay. Minato added that things were supposed to get better soon. The hero said that life was a pretty complicated thing. He continued that if anything, he had savings for a rainy day, but in the meantime, he would continue to look for a job. Minato added that the amount of sweets could be reduced until he found one. The turtle opened his mouth. Light began to pour out of his mouth. Everything around it was illuminated by that light. Minato was standing back, but noticed the glow as well. He asked what it was. The hero turned around. He squeezed his eyes shut. Minato said it was very bright. The young man asked what it was. After a moment, the turtle closed its mouth. Minato thought as if nothing had happened. He walked over to the turtle. The hero asked what the turtle had just done. Yamagami said that the turtle's spirits were lucky beasts. He continued that they were one of the 4 spirits that brought good luck. The god added that this meant it was also his thanks. Minato wanted to reply something, but his phone rang. The hero picked up the call. It was his mom. He said hello to her. Minato was surprised. He asked that it was true. Everyone was on hold waiting for the hero to disconnect the call. Minato continued that he understood everything. He thanked his mom. The marmosets started to look over at each other. The young man said that the lottery he had sent before he came here. He added that his mom said he won $1 million and the money had already been sent. Minato was overjoyed. The marmots started jumping around. Some of them said that it was awesome. The marmosets started discussing amongst themselves that they would now be able to enjoy the sweets. Minato looked at the spirit of the turtle. He thought that this spirit really did bring good luck. The hero asked himself if the spirit was pleased. It was night in the courtyard. Minato shouted, asking what they were joking about. The spirits watched Minato and ate the treats. The hero said that somehow all the tickets he bought turned out to be winning tickets. Minato asked if it was really the turtle's power. The hero thanked him that she had helped him with the money. He added that it was still too much though. Minato got another phone call. The hero yelled that he had won a prize in an online drawing. He yelled that he had had enough. The turtle was sleeping peacefully. Harima brought the box to Minato. He thanked Minato. The hero replied that he was always willing to help. Minato thanked him for his trust. Hero received a request from Harima-san to create amulets. He had met earlier and agreed on the quantity. Minato asked not to pay the same amount. Harima asked what to give him in return. Minato replied that anything but money. Yamagami sniffed the box. Yamagami waited impatiently. Minato thought Yamagami-san was in anticipation. Harima asked himself that, had this garden really changed since his last visit? Harima asked himself that, or was it his imagination? The guest did not see the good spirits that lived here. Harima asked himself that this garden had gotten bigger. Minato said he knew these talismans were far from perfect. He held out the amulets to Harima. The guest thanked him. The leaves had the names of Japanese sweets written on them. Harima asked himself what he was encouraging this spirit to do. Harima left. Minato said that Harima-san must have thought he liked Japanese sweets. The hero realized that he was a good man. The young man took the box and was about to open it. There were some treats in there. Minato pointed his finger at them. Yamagami's eyes drooled. Yamagami said that this beautiful cherry flavor and the bean paste that melted in his mouth was just delicious. Minato smiled. He said he was glad he did. The god told Minato that if he wanted, he could eat one thing. Minato thanked the god, but turned him down. The hero explained that he didn't really like sweets, so he had to eat it himself. Minato opened a packet of chips. Yamagami's face changed. The hero ate a chip. He said, "What was delicious?" Yamagami told Minato that if he wanted one, he wouldn't offer any more. Minato took off his jacket. He asked what he wanted to say. The hero asked Siri why he shouldn't have a snack too. He continued that Yamagami-san had already started the meal. Siri asked what the goodies were. Minato replied that there were cassella and cookies. Minato brought out the goodies. Groundhog said it looked delicious. Someone asked Minato if he could give it to them too. The hero turned around to see who it was. There were two childlike spirits floating in the air. One was red, the other blue. Minato asked himself who they were. The hero began to call out to Yamagami-san. The mountain god replied that it had been a long time. He added that they were the gods of wind and thunder. Minato asked what they were so famous for. One of the gods interrogated him. He told Minato that he was saying funny things. The god turned to Yamagami. He said he was worried about him. He continued that Yamagami was at death's door when he came down from the mountains. Yamagami became angry. He replied to Hazake that he wasn't the type to give up easily. Hazake told him to calm down because it was just a joke. He continued that the wind whispered to him that he had made the area more livable, so they were curious and decided to pay a visit. God looked at Minato. God said that was how it was. He added that it made sense to him. Minato was uncomfortable. God noticed that there was also a turtle spirit residing here. Minato brought treats. He said that since they wanted to eat, they should take some. God replied that he would accept it. Minato thought that this garden was more lively now. God offered to show them something interesting. He asked Minato if he could borrow a piece of cloth. The hero replied that he only had a towel. God replied that was fine. God told the marmots to get on the towel. With a flick of his finger, the towel obeyed the wind and flew up. The wind god shouted that this was the wind god's individual ability. He added that it was a flying carpet. The carpet began to fly very fast. The marmots were uneasy. Minato asked himself that wasn't it too fast. The hero asked God that he was sure everything was under control. The god told him not to worry. He asked that weren't the parties having fun. Minato wondered. He thought that the power of the wind could be used to dry laundry. The hero asked the lightning god, Raijinen, that he was going to be struck by lightning. The god replied that he had no intention of doing so. The wind god asked Minato if he could turn toward him. The hero turned around. The god was about to cast a spell. The wind god touched Minato's forehead. He said that to thank him for his hospitality, he had given him a gift of power. The god added that he was sure the power would be useful to him. Minato asked that he could now create tornadoes. The god replied that if he could master the spell. The hero said that he didn't feel like anything had changed. God said that he just had to visualize it. He explained that the wind could have been anywhere. God continued that he just had to concentrate his energy on his fingertips. God created a vortex around his finger. He added that afterward he needed to let it out all at once. The wind was sweeping away everything around him. Minato was delighted. God suggested that Minato give it a try. Everyone present watched him. Minato closed his eyes. He repeated to himself that he had to concentrate the energy at his fingertips. The next thing was to release it all at once. He tried it, but nothing came out. Minato became frustrated. The wind god said he just needed to practice. The lightning god told the wind god that they should have left already. The wind god agreed with him. The lightning god said then he would come again. The wind god said that next time he would like to see the results of his training. The gods flew away. Minato watched them go. He thought he could use the power of the wind. Yamagami said that he had to decide. He continued that, however, if he learned how to control that power, he could use it in an exorcism. Minato asked if that was true. He said that it was a great power that the wind god had given him and he would like to use it. The hero shouted that it would be great to use that power to dry laundry. Yamagami was not pleased. Minato asked Yamagami how he was supposed to practice. The turtle touched his leg. Minato asked Kamesin that something happened. The hero said that something was on the other side. Minato saw that a tree had grown. The hero walked over there. He said that it was where he planted the seed. Minato added that it had already grown so much, it was amazing. He touched one leaf. The hero asked what, was it really God's power? The turtle touched the base of the tree with his head. Everyone else also approached the tree. They observed the tree together. Leaves appeared on the tree. The sun was shining outside. The leaf of the tree began to float in the air. Minato had been practicing to master wind magic. He succeeded in lifting the leaf into the air. Yamagami walked up to him. He said that he was now able to use the power of wind. Minato told Yamagami-sen that he had made it. He continued that it was still very difficult to control the power of the wind. The hero added that even picking up fallen leaves took a long time. In front of Minato was a pile of fallen leaves. The wind had swept away all the leaves. The friends looked at it with disappointment. Minato started to yell. He said that he honestly didn't want to do this anymore. Yamagami replied that he just didn't need to rush. Minato said that he was really good at drying his hair, though. He didn't have to control anything. Yamagami wanted to say something, but someone rang the doorbell. Yamagami said he wondered who had come to see them. He asked that it was a courier. Minato said he would be right with him. Yamagami began to yawn. The turtle was sleeping peacefully nearby. Today was business as usual. There was a calm atmosphere in Kusunoki's house. The god of the mountains was sleeping. Minato said that a package came from his parents. He asked Yamagami that he was asleep. The mountain god replied that he wasn't anymore. Yamagami asked that his family had a spa resort, didn't they? Minato answered in the affirmative. The hero exclaimed that they sent him some delicious steamed buns. Yamagami perked up. Minato continued that he thought the rest were things he personally asked them to send. He said there was a hat and jacket, a backpack. Minato pulled some shoes out of the box. Yamagami asked what it was. The hero replied that they were climbing shoes. He continued that they were old, but he thought he could still use them. The young man wanted to say something else, but Yamagami interrupted him. He looked at the box of steamed buns. The god asked that he was going to take up mountaineering. Minato replied that he was thinking of going to Yamagami-san's mountain. Yamagami questioned him back. Drool was flowing from his mouth. Minato suggested that he eat some sweets first. Minato said that Yamagami-san lived near him, but he didn't know that. The hero continued that he was curious about what his house looked like. He asked that Yamagami-san's house was like a temple. The mountain god replied that he thought he couldn't have gotten to it. Minato said that he really wanted to. The god ate the goodies. He replied that his mountain was very steep to climb. Minato said that was why he had prepared climbing equipment. He asked that it wasn't enough. The hero asked the god why he was against it. Yamagami said that if he said he wanted to go, there was no reason to stop him. He added that he still would have been able to go halfway without effort. Yamagami added that he just needed to move towards his goal, and he could give him a little support. Minato rejoiced. He thanked the god. Minato said the shrine of the mountain god sounded incredible. Yamagami said there was nothing there. The hero looked at him with a questioning look. The mountain god explained that the shrine was on the verge of being destroyed. There was nothing divine in it. Yamagami added that the place had probably become just a tourist attraction now. Minato remained silent. People believed in a god and came to the shrine to pray. This mountain was honored by the people. The marmots were showing him the way. One of them said he had to go there. He warned Minato to watch where he was going. The hero felt sick. He asked to wait for a moment. Minato asked himself why he thought he could get there without much effort. The groundhog sat on Minato's neck. He asked the hero if he was tired. Minato answered in the negative. He said that he was fine. The young man continued that he hadn't been exercising much lately, so it was too much for him. Groundhog said that he was still an incredible person though. He added that it was a shorter route. Ahead was a river with rocks sticking out of it. Surok said that once they crossed that mountain, they would end up there. Minato asked they were being serious. Groundhog asked Usagi how long he was going to ride Minato. Usagi replied that he didn't know. Minato laughed. He said that it wasn't hard on him and he was fine. The hero didn't expect to be climbing a mountain feeling like he was going on a picnic, but he didn't expect it to be this hard. Minato thought it was really good that he had asked for the gear to be sent to him. Minato jumped on the rocks that were visible from the river. Along the way, the travelers encountered a snake. They had to traverse a huge rock. Minato climbed up this rock. He was surprised. The hero shouted that it was a road. The groundhog said that if you follow this road, the temple would be a stone's throw away. Minato breathed a sigh of relief. He said it was such an easy road. Surok said that it had been used by people in the past. Surok continued that most of it had disappeared over the years, but this one remained. They moved forward. Minato asked that since Seri and the others were born recently, he asked how they knew all of this. Groundhog replied that when they were born, Yamagami had shared their memories with them. The hero said that's how it was. The groundhog said that they had come. He pointed his finger forward. Groundhog told Minato to look over there. It was a small and dilapidated temple. Minato took off his hat. He thought that was what Yamagami-san's temple was. The hero thought it was more destroyed than he realized. Minato rushed towards the temple. Groundhog said that even if he didn't, Yamagami wouldn't be offended. Minato nodded. The groundhog said they knew he respected the gods, so he didn't need to worry. The other groundhog said there was no point. He offered to eat. Minato remembered that Yamagami had said his temple was probably just a landmark now. Minato thought that Yamagami-san really didn't seem to care much about that. This mountain had originally belonged to Yamagami. The existence of shrines created by humans without permission most likely didn't matter to the god. Minato said that still he understood the feelings of a person wanting to pray. He added that that was why people in the past had built this shrine. The hero said that the source of the god's power was the people's faith. Groundhog replied that he was right. Minato said he thought the reason Yamagami-san lived so long was because of this temple. He ran his hand over the stone. Minato added that if that was the case, he couldn't have left it like that. The marmots looked at him. Minato smiled. He said it was probably just self-satisfaction. Siri said he was wrong. He added that they would help too. Groundhog called out to his brothers. Minato was smiling. They began to rebuild Yamagami-san's shrine. The hero folded his arms in front of him. One of the groundhogs said that it really did look like a temple now. Another agreed with him, and a third said it was so clean. Minato said that they were right. He continued that even though it was hard, he was glad he was able to get there. The hero added that he had done a lot of things without permission. He said that in case Yamagami-san felt uncomfortable. Groundhog said that everything was fine. He added that his sincere feelings reached Yamagami. Minato smiled. The other groundhog asked if he could have some sweets now. Minato offered to go back home. The hero held out the treat to the groundhog. He asked him to show him the way home. The groundhog told him to follow him. The cookie fell to the ground. Minato apologized. The groundhog got angry. Minato noticed it. The groundhogs scattered. The hero asked them to wait. He didn't understand what was happening. Minato realized that he had to go after them. The three marmots raced so fast on the rocks between the trees that they chased the birds out of the forest. The animals raced on the rocks up the mountain. Sometimes their paws would slip, but they always managed to hold on and run on. Minato was also running on the rocks. Sometimes he would stumble and his foot would hit a puddle, but he didn't really care. The marmots suddenly stopped when they got to the top of the mountain, stood on their hind legs and started looking into the distance where everything was in a black fog. Minato as he stumbled back into the puddle saying it was dangerous enough and he could have fallen off. Exhaling heavily, he looked up at the elevated area and thought about the fact that something had most likely happened. After all, he had noticed that Seri and the others were acting quite aggressively, as if they sensed danger was coming. Minato was hoping to catch up with them. Suddenly, out of nowhere, one of the groundhogs jumped on him and called his name. The groundhog started begging Minato for help. The guy asked Usagi what was going on. The groundhog tiredly replied that they just couldn't take it anymore. Siri and Torika too. The guy exhaled in relief. He was glad nothing had happened to them. The guy looked in the distance and saw a blob of black mist, but it seemed barely noticeable. Minato remembered that he had seen a similar phenomenon once before. Usagi said it was their job to protect the mountain from something like that, but if he kept asking questions, they wouldn't be able to get near it. The groundhog who was hugging Minato said that he felt very bad. The boy asked what was wrong. At that moment, Usagi asked if Minato had taken his notebook. The boy pressed his lips together. The boy looked in his notebook where he had written down the things he was to take on the hike. It was water, a towel, a flashlight, an offering. He tore off one sheet and took a step forward into the black fog. The marmots were very worried about the boy. After all, this area was very polluted. They were afraid something might happen to him. Minato replied that he was fine and he had made it. The guy was walking amidst the black fog. The marmots were amazed that he was walking so calmly through the dense black fog. Minato came to some sort of elevation and realized that he had only seen a small part of this terrible fog. The marmots shouted to the guy to hurry up and carry out the exorcism. The guy apologized for the slight delay and got down to business. He looked at the piece of paper he had torn off earlier. The guy hoped it would work. Then he threw the piece of paper from the dais. The dreadful fog immediately evaporated. The marmots were amazed at the sight. The marmots started shouting happily that the fog disappeared incredibly fast and now they could breathe easier. They praised the guy for the job he had done. However, Minato himself noticed that the fog had not completely dissipated, which could mean that he had not completely banished it. For such a case, the guy had an idea too. He suddenly took his notebook and started tearing many sheets out of it, tossing them up into the sky. The marmots looked at the pieces of paper flying from the sky like a heavy snowfall. Minato picked up one sheet. The boy realized that there was only one sheet left that hadn't disappeared. However, the fog had completely cleared. Minato told the groundhog that he was now completely rid of it. The groundhog jumped on his back again and started praising him. The guy said he was lucky he had taken some notes just in case. However, the guy wondered where the strange creature came from out of nowhere. Suddenly the creature appeared. It looked like a pony with a long, thick mane, scales, and a long mustache. It collapsed to the ground. Minato shouted to the marmots that the creature was visible. One of the marmots suggested that it had been captured by vengeful spirits. The boy touched the creature with his hand and asked if it was alive. Suddenly, the strange animal jumped to its feet and looked at the guy with human eyes. Minato said hello. The animal started to get very worried and jumped up sharply into the sky. Minato was surprised at what was happening. The animal quickly galloped off into the distance. Minato noticed that it appeared to be incredibly cowardly. However, he was glad that it was safe now. The boy told the marmots that they needed to get down the mountain. It would be dark soon and asked for their help. They shouted with one voice that they were always ready to come to his aid. As they descended, Minato assumed that Yamagami-san was already tired of waiting for them. A man in a strict suit was walking down the street. Suddenly, a cluster of black mist appeared behind him. A scary black monster with sharp claws wanted to attack the man in a strict suit. However, the man noticed the danger and turned around to face the monster and punched it in the torso. The fearsome monster fell to the ground after a single blow. While the man was wiping his hands, suddenly from the darkness someone said with a laugh that he was dangerous enough. A man with a beard and an interesting hat asked the man named Harima if he had been a martial artist before. Harima replied that if he had seen it all he could help. He asked if it was necessary, and added that they had not worked together for a long time, but that his method of fighting had changed since he had exterminated 2 spirits. The man replied that nothing had changed, it was just that now the most effective way was to use his fists. The man in the hat laughed and thanked him for his efforts. Harima said that they should finish soon, because he felt it was not a good place to be. The more people who visited a place, the easier it was for evil to settle there. The man in the hat nodded his head and said that he was absolutely right. However, there was a problem. The man in the hat said that the problem was that he was approaching. Some blonde-haired man was madly annoyed about something, especially looking at the men who passed by. Through his teeth, he mumbled that he hated Harem. The man in the hat tossed 5 sheets of paper into the black mist, and taking off his jacket said it was too stuffy, adding that he should wear a kimono like his father did. Harima mumbled that he wasn't as young as he used to be. Katsuragi replied that he was still perfectly fine. Suddenly, the men heard strange noises. Katsuragi said that no matter how you look at it, there's a man being tortured. He's already having a hard time and asked Harima if he should help him. Harima wondered if he was really here and noticed a clot of black mist. A scary monster with sharp claws attacked the blonde-haired guy. It was clutching his neck so hard that he couldn't say anything. The guy tried to resist, but the monster was much stronger, not giving him a chance to escape. The guy reached out his trembling hand to the girl with the rack, who was huddled against the wall in fear, asking for her rescue. The guy started shouting at her to help him immediately, but she only looked at him with a frantic look. Suddenly, the monster threw the guy to the floor. He coughed and turned to the girl named Horikawa again. The monster abruptly grabbed the guy again and lifted him above the ground. The girl was startled. The monster threw the guy again, imprinting his face into the asphalt. The guy lifted his head up and tiredly said she was safe. The guy was frantically worried, for he didn't know what to do. At this moment, a worried Harima, while adjusting his black gloves, thought about the fact that he might not be able to win. The blonde-haired guy was surprised to see Harima enter the room. He looked at him with a serious look. Harima was the kind of person who could exorcise an unclean spirit even if it was of average level. He pulled the black gloves off his hands and tossed them to the side. A pentagram showed on the brush of his hand. Katsuragi was shocked. Harima ordered everyone to hide behind his back. His pentagram glowed with a bright light. A moment later the monster vaporized. Harima looked at his hand and noticed that his pentagram was almost gone. Suddenly, Katsuragi called out to him. He jumped up to the man and asked him what his power was and where it came from, then added that he would tell him about the amulet's power if he revealed the secret. Suddenly, a blonde-haired guy named Ikiji started to resent the girl with the rack. He called her a nasty woman. He started to get hysterical, asking why she didn't help him. He told her not to go against his orders after all. Katsuragi yelled to Ikiji to stop yelling. Katsuragi walked over to the girl and asked if she was all right. She said she was fine. She bowed to Harima and thanked her for her help. Ikiji and Horikawa left. The guy was mad that he couldn't do anything. Katsuragi asked Harima why there was such a big difference between him and Ikiji if they both came from a famous family, and then asked why the pathetic Horikawa was still following him. Harima told him that the Horikawa family is a branch of the Ikiji family, and going against him is almost impossible. Katsuragi said he was right and went back to the topic of Harima's strength. Harima replied that it wouldn't take long to tell the story. Katsuragi was shocked that not only was Harima unknowingly casting out demons, but he was also living in a sacred place. The men sat and drank. Katsuragi, holding his drink, asked about shopping. Katsuragi said that the story is very hard to believe, but he sees it with his own eyes and it really happens. He then asked if it was true that the pentagram that was on his hand was also made by him. Harima replied that he drew it from the bottom of his heart. Katsuragi asked with a smile if it was true that his family crest was a pentagram. Harima replied that he had no other choice and had to accept this sincere gift. Katsuragi said that given the labor shortage, he completely understood why he was using this guy's power. However, he was a civilian after all, which meant that he had to be mindful of the fact that he could run into trouble, and Harima used that power right in front of this guy. He cited Ikiji as an example, because his mania to always compete with Harima looked as abnormal as possible. He then touched his beard and said that if there was a god behind him, there was no need to worry. He then mumbled that Baijan's Deifuki is incredible and has delicious flavor. Katsuragi asked if it's hard to throw a piece of paper for notes, and then asked if he could use that as a business card, like a cat's eye. Harima asked what a cat's eye was. Katsuragi was surprised that the man didn't know anything about it. Minato was walking down the street with a bag and reasoned that he was a little nervous that Deifuku might not be available, because it was usually only available in the summer, and he was glad he could buy it now. Now the guy was walking to look for sake for Kame-san. Suddenly he bumped into the shoulder of a passerby. The guy thought that maybe due to his carelessness he hit the person, so he apologized. It turned out that he bumped into Ikiji. He looked at the guy with an angry look. Ikiji walked on and Minato stopped and turned around to look at the guy. He didn't understand why the guy looked at him so angry. Minato assumed that he had hit him hard in the shoulder and that's why he was so angry. There was a leaf stuck to the guy's back, but he didn't notice it. The guy was having a hard time walking up the mountain with bags in both hands. Suddenly he saw something he didn't expect. Harima was standing in front of him. He apologized for today not being a meeting day. Minato replied that it was okay. He was a pretty busy man after all. Harima said he came today for another reason. He was asked to come here. Minato asked what other business. The man started to answer and sharply told the guy not to move. He noticed a sticky sheet on Minato's back and took it off. The guy asked what it was. Harima said shikigami. The guy realized it was what Amido was using. Harima immediately remembered Katsuraga's words that he could be in big trouble. Harima explained that it was his coworker who had become aware of his abilities. The man admitted that it was his fault, for he had not been careful, and used his power around this coworker. Harima bowed to the guy and apologized. For that, Minato replied that it was fine and no big deal. The guy at that moment only thought that the animal named Yamagami didn't care about that at all, and was only interested in sweets. Harima reminded the guy that he had come to talk about something. He explained that his colleague was the kind of person who would stop at nothing. Even this one Shikigami had used to track him down, and that was why he had come to warn him to be careful, and he himself would try to protect him as much as possible. Minato at this moment continued to stare at the animal that wanted sweets so badly. Harima noticed the guy's inattention and asked if he was listening to him at all. Minato replied that he was. The guy said he just didn't understand why his coworker was doing that. He's an Amido too after all. Harima replied that he's probably just lonely. and talked about how his colleague like him was born into a famous Amido family and was compared to him from an early age. But Harima himself didn't consider himself better than him. However, it is likely that Harima's abilities hurt his colleague's self-esteem a lot, and that's why his colleague wants to prove his superiority, even if he has to use nefarious methods to do so. The animal sitting next to Minato said that this behavior is very similar to humans. Harima said that he plans to deal with it as soon as possible, so he will refrain from optional walks for a while, because this house is not easy to get into. Harima started to get up and said he had to go now. Minato asked him to stick around for a minute. The boy handed the man the notes he had made himself. Harima noticed that the notes were all written down with different pens. Minato explained that he was actually doing a little experiment. Harima asked about the experiment. Minato explained that he felt that his power was dependent on the pen he was writing with, so he wanted to try out different pens and find the right one that would give him better results than he was getting now. Harima agreed that there is indeed a difference. Harima said that was a really good idea and asked if he could draw a different pattern, a 5-pointed star, which is his family crest. Minato was surprised, for he didn't know that before. Suddenly Minato asked the man to give his hand. Harima was surprised and confused, asked what he was holding out his hand for. Minato said his pentagram was almost gone. After a while, Harima walked away. Minato sat and looked up at the sky. The animal approached the guy and said that it sensed his concern about what he had heard earlier. Minato replied that he had never been attacked by anyone in his life, and he didn't even know what to do in such a situation. The guy also noticed that the animal had gotten fat. The marmots came to the guys and asked if Minato had become a target. One of them suggested chasing away the opponents with the power of the god of wind. The guy replied that it was impossible, because he can only make a small breeze. The marmots asked for a demonstration of this skill. Minato showed the marmots as a small breeze came out of his finger. Minato thought about Harima's words that it wasn't easy to enter the sacred place, and he would only have to reach the door and then leave. However, he could try to climb in like a true thief. The animal said it was worth it to use force. Minato was sitting at the dining table eating. Suddenly something confused him and he put down his chopsticks. The guy looked out the window. That's where his animal was looking too. They suspected something wrong. Minato noticed that Yamagami-san has been sleeping a lot lately, and he also doesn't see Kunitz. Meanwhile, Ikiji to Horikawa was walking in the area where Minato lives. The guy was yelling at her because she was taking her time. Horikawa felt very insecure, however she couldn't go against Ikiji's will. Ikiji said he wished he could finish his business as soon as possible and go home. He was angry that Minato was living in such a strange place. Horikawa quietly asked him if he really wanted to see him. Ikiji abruptly approached the girl and angrily looked at her and interjected what she had just said. The girl from the suddenness bounced a bit away from him, not realizing what she should do. Ikiji started yelling like a madman. How dare she express her opinion? Did she want to get a new enemy in the person of Ikiji? And added that she just had to follow his orders and nothing extra. A frightened Horikawa apologized to Ikiji. While they were walking, Ikiji said that he just had to make Minato stop cooperating with Harima, since the latter was helping him for some reason. Ikiji smiled and said he wanted to see the look on his face when the plan succeeded. Ikiji and Horikawa walked on in silence, looking for Minato's house. Minato was worried that Yamagami had been sleeping a lot lately, and he got the idea to put buns under the animal's nose. And in a moment, Yamagami jumped up on 4 paws and shouted that there were brown sugar buns in front of him. Minato was pleased that the animal woke up so quickly. Minato explained to Yamagami that he was wondering if he could go with him. The animal replied that it wanted those buns first. The guy said he would bring water to the sweets now. Suddenly they heard the sound of someone coming to them. Minato wondered who had come at this hour. Yamagami sensed some kind of negativity. It turned out that Ikiji had come to Minato's place. He yelled for him to come out quickly, and then assumed he had escaped, so he ordered Horikawa to go to the back door. Horikawa panicked, because even without any powers, she could feel the immense power of this place. It was definitely not a place to go in with harmful thoughts, but Ikiji stood his ground. She couldn't understand if Ikiji didn't feel the same way. Meanwhile, the guy was angry at the girl again because she didn't go to the back door. In anger, he yelled that he was insanely annoyed with Minato and banged his foot on the door. Horikawa yelled for him to stop, but it was too late. Ikiji collapsed to the ground, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the pile of trees surrounding him again. He stood up and started to look around. There wasn't a soul around, just trees and sepulchral silence. He started running from tree to tree in panic, trying to figure out how this happened. After all, he had just been a table outside Minato's house. He started to call out for Horikawa, but she wasn't there. Ikeji gave a disgruntled tisk-tisk and slammed his foot against a tree. He kicked his foot against the tree over and over again, wondering where he was. Suddenly he felt something strange. Ikeji reached into his inside jacket pocket and found his amulet missing. Suddenly something grabbed his leg. The guy wondered what was going on, and then his leg was pulled along the ground. Ikeji wondered what was here. It turned out that Ikeji was grabbed by a tree he was kicked by. The guy was shocked and couldn't believe it. He was screaming for help, wanting someone to help him. Ikeji started to fight off the roots of the tree with his feet, and he managed to get his feet out, but his shoe was still there. With his bare foot, the guy ran and didn't understand why the tree was chasing him. He assumed it was Minato's work. He then screamed hysterically that it was Harima's fault, that he had cruelly tricked him. After all, Harima had always looked at him with contempt, and that was why Ikeji hated him so much. Ikeji promised himself that when he got out of here, he would cruelly avenge Harima's deception. Meanwhile, Yamagami was eating brown sugar buns. Ikeji became paranoid. He thought he was hearing things, but at the same time he assumed it was just a hallucination. He suddenly wondered desperately if there was no way out of here. With weary feet he walked through the grass and dry, sharp branches. In anger, he pounded the first tree he saw with his fist again, and at the same instant, Ikeji flew off to the side. He flew a decent distance and slammed into the trunk of a thick tree. Bowing his head, he was breathing heavily. Ikeji thought with half-closed eyes that his death had come, but he was not prepared for this outcome. Suddenly he began to fall into the unknown. Then Ikeji thought that death had come, but he found himself again among the trees, but without wounds. Touching his face, Ikeji couldn't believe he was alive. Ikeji didn't understand how he had escaped. He was bleeding, but now it was gone. He realized that such things couldn't be real and he should get out of here as soon as possible. Suddenly the tree again roots grabbed his leg and dragged him along the ground. Ikeji started screaming for it to get off of him. He yelled that this tree was getting to him, and since it wouldn't back off, he would destroy it. Ikeji took the branch that cordoned off his leg and broke it. A moment later, however, the branches enveloped him up to his neck. He could no longer move. And after another moment, only his terrified face was visible among the branches. The tree almost completely enveloped the guy. Ikeji screamed like he was screaming for the last time, because he thought he was going to die. After a moment, however, Ikeji found himself back among the trees, without a single wound. He started screaming in rage, and clutching his head. He assumed he was going crazy. He couldn't understand if he was back again alive and uninjured. Suddenly cracks appeared on the ground beneath him. At first Ikeji didn't realize what was happening. A huge deep hole appeared underneath the guy, into which he fell. The moment he fell into this black hole, Ikeji thought he had died again. However, after that Ikeji came back to life as many as 7 more times. It was an endless pain. After suffering for what seemed like an eternity, he realized something. Ikeji realized that if you hit something or break something, bells would ring and everything would go back to normal. He grabbed the grass, wanting to rip it out of his anger, but he changed his mind, because that would be even worse. Ikeji burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. He fell face down into the ground, his breathing labored. He rolled over onto his side as he continued to cry. Ikeji begged for forgiveness again and again. The boy took off his jacket, and while walking through this dense forest he came across a small temple. Ikeji noticed that he didn't hear the bell ringing when he found the temple, but he assumed that he might be on the right path. He made the lowest bow to the temple and began to pray to the god of the mountain. He said with concern in his voice that he had said many rude things earlier, and so he sincerely apologized. He then asked in a quiet voice if the temple could bring him back to the real world. The guy started saying please many times for the temple to bring him back to the real world. He asked the temple to return to the real world while flooding with tears. Suddenly Ikeji collapsed on the ground in the real world. He almost crushed Horikawa. However, he was happy to see her. The guy's tears were flowing in rivers. He called the girl by name and said he was back. The girl was surprised that he called her by name without even insulting her. Breathing heavily, Ikeji said he was very happy to be here. The girl was very afraid of the guy, especially when he approached her. Suddenly, Ikeji started imitating the sound of a bell. He kept doing it over and over again, and then suddenly he got a twitch as if he had been electrocuted. And after a moment, he ran off into the distance. Horikawa was confused. She couldn't understand what was wrong with him. Initially, the girl thought he just wanted to kick the door. However, then he started screaming loudly and then started crying. She sighed and thought that Ikeji was probably having a bad dream. At that moment, Minato opened the door. Minato asked Horikawa what she wanted. The girl replied that she probably got the wrong door and apologized for disturbing her. Minato went back inside and told Yamagami that just someone had gotten the wrong address, and then asked the animal if he liked that musical pendant. All the while Yamagami was twitching the bell with his tail. Yamagami answered nothing and continued to jingle the bell, while he quietly told Ikiji to disappear as soon as possible. The next day, Harima came to visit Minato. He started talking about the incident with Amido, and told him that for reasons unknown, Ikiji had calmed down and wasn't going to bother him. Minato said that was great news. Harima corrected his glasses and said there was another problem. But when Minato asked about it, the man said it was nothing serious. Meanwhile, something strange was going on in Amido's office. Ikiji started courting Horikawa hard, literally not giving her a pass. He was angry that she didn't want to go out with him. This picture was being watched by the Harima sisters. Horikawa took out her phone and turned on the sound of the bells, making Ikiji shiver. Ikiji said that he had lost a lot of weight recently and was much prettier. The Harima sisters thought it was as if the guy was stalking Horikawa and his behavior was like sexual harassment. Horikawa sounded the bells again and Ikiji vanished from the office in an instant. The girl was glad that thanks to that sound, the guy was immediately behind her. She knew for a fact that this seemingly ordinary sound was scaring Ikiji. Minato looked at the tree that grows in his yard and noticed that it had stopped growing altogether, which saddened the guy. He suddenly called out to Yamagami, but the guy suddenly screamed. Yamagami couldn't understand how it was. Chestnut Kinton with dried persimmons. He wanted to taste this fall novelty so badly that drool was coming out of his mouth. Minato sat up to the animal and said that if they visited Echigoya's store the other day, they would get to the novelty sale. Yamagami replied that this store was quite far away, so a note should be made. Minato asked Yamagami if he would like to go into town with him. The animal asked why they would go shopping for fall novelties. Minato replied that they were delicious too. Yamagami anxiously started to ask if they would be in Echigoya. What about Subdued? Minato looked at him and said that he was acting just like the old man who once said that bean paste was the best. They arrived at the store and Minato pointed a finger at the bowl. Minato explained that it was a matcha bowl, and it was big enough. Yamagami asked if he was sure, and then added that he was generally okay with it himself. Minato noticed Yamagami scrutinizing the bowls. The animal was looking for a bowl that was comfortable to drink from. The boy suddenly pointed his finger at Yamagami and exclaimed that this was it. Minato said cheerfully that they had decided on the dishes and now they should go get a pillow. Yamagami said he wasn't interested in such a thing. As soon as they got to the pillow department, Yamagami immediately picked out a pillow that he really liked. However, it was very small for his body. Minato said that they had to special order a pillow like that so that it would be Yamagami's size. The guy and the animal went outside. Minato said that now they would go buy some sweets and then head home. Yamagami was very excited to try the fall novelty. All of a sudden, the guy noticed something strange. People around them were speculating about the nice smells around them. People were talking about how it smelled like a meadow or even a forest. However, they couldn't figure out where the smell was coming from. Minato realized that Yamagami was weakly emitting divine power. However, the people around still sensed something wrong and avoided him. It was an interesting sight. Yamagami deliberately hid himself from the people around him, so no one really sees him. However, there are still those who can see him. An elderly street store owner noticed Yamagami. When Yamagami passed by, the hunchbacked old lady bowed and prayed to God. The reasoning behind this is that a person who is very religious and pure of heart will always be able to spot God even if he is hiding. Suddenly, her son came running to her and started asking what was wrong. The old woman's son noticed that her back had become straight and she was standing on two legs. The woman looked up into the sky and thanked God. Yamagami and Minato walked on. Suddenly, the animal stopped. Minato asked Yamagami what was wrong. The animal replied that it could smell a strong odor. Minato questioned if he was sure. Yamagami replied firmly that the stench here was unbearable. They immediately walked towards the odor that worried Yamagami. Minato asked if they would get in trouble. However, the animal replied that nothing bad would happen. The dubious odor led Yamagami and Minato to an abandoned building where a sign advertising more courses hung. Minato pulled notes out of his pocket and said that they needed to exorcise the foul things from here. A small sketch about marmots. One of them mumbled, after chapter 8. One of the marmots suggested that the rest of the marmots practice. The other marmots were confused by this and asked what they were practicing for. So the marmot said it was to remember what happened when he and Minato went to the temple. The groundhog explained that at that moment they were just scared of the unclean thing and there was nothing they could do. He then added that they looked pathetic at that moment and if that was okay with them. The groundhogs replied that it wasn't really. Then one of them asked what they were supposed to do in training. At this point, all three marmots stood up thoughtfully. One of them asked how Yamagami had gotten so strong. at which point the idea of repeating on him to become just as tough came to them. They decided to go through his memories. They saw that 100 years ago he was sleeping sweetly, and 200 years ago he was sleeping too, and then they saw that even earlier he was just sleeping too. Then the groundhog suggested that it might be a kind of meditation, and it is a very hard workout. They decided to try to do it. They closed their eyes, took a deep breath, and thought about nothing. Each of them tried to get the unnecessary thoughts out of their heads, and it was difficult. However, all three marmots ended up thinking about their favorite sweets. Suddenly Yamagami came to them. He was looking at the marmots rolling on the ground from side to side with a smile. It was obvious from them that they were still quite immature. Minato walked into an abandoned building that had a horrible odor coming from it. Yamagami noticed that the darkness was increasing. Yamagami hated places like this where so many evil spirits dwelled. Minato ran closer to the animal. They began to look around the room they had gotten into. Minato noticed that the room was quite clean and the house might still be usable, but there was no one else here. Minato noticed the unmade bed, leftover food and trash, and realized that someone had lived here before. Yamagami said that the person had not lived here long, because the human body is very fragile. Yamagami said that he can't find anything good here, but if one neglects to purify the spiritual path, evil spirits can spread, and he himself was once on the verge of becoming a fallen god. Minato said he was happy to help him. They found the last door. Minato opened it carefully. They walked into this room. Minato sensed an evil spirit. Minato mumbled that the evil spirit was in this very room. Yamagami asked Minato what an evil spirit was, and he explained that it was a lost soul that had been carried away by vivid emotions while alive, and now it clung to the world as if it were still alive, a foolish and miserable existence. Yamagami walked over to the cornered evil spirit and raised his paw on it and performed a soul cleansing. Minato looked at this picture with surprise. He remembered what Yamagami had told him, that his power was destruction and Yamagami's ability was purification. The boy wondered if it was possible to destroy them without a trace. Would the unfortunate soul be purified and returned to the vortex of reincarnation? He didn't know the answers to these questions, nor did he know what constituted salvation for a person. However, the faint light enveloping everything around him, after which one felt peaceful, was special. It seemed to Minato that it was like a mother's care. The evil spirit turned into orbs that emitted a soft, pleasant light. The boys walked out of the abandoned building, which was no longer shrouded in black mist, and traveled onward. Yamagami was very happy to finally get to Edoga's. The man sold bean buns and a variety of Japanese sweets. He greeted the boys by saying that he was making steamed buns right now. Minato noticed something unusual that struck him. The guy noticed that Yamagami glittered like real gold. He asked the vendor for 2 servings. The guy got 2 servings of steamed buns. At the same moment, Yamagami pounced on them. Yamagami began to sparkle even more. Suddenly, the vendor told the guy that his brother must have settled near the mountain. The man said that was what Minato had told him the last time he came to see him. The guy was surprised that he remembered his words. Then the man asked if he had gone to the mountain before. Minato said he had climbed it a couple times. And then the man said with a smile that Minato must have met the sacred dog before. The boy was greatly surprised. Minato became very embarrassed and started to say that he had never seen anything like that and it wasn't a lie. He really had never met a sacred dog. Yamagami quietly mumbled that he was a wolf. Then the man told the boy in his ear that to be honest there was a very kind dog living in those mountains. The man began to tell his story. One day he got lost in the mountains, and while he was wandering aimlessly, the sun began to set. Then he was at a loss, hungry and thirsty. All of a sudden a huge white dog appeared behind him and barked. The man was frightened and started to run away from it. But the dog did not stop barking, and in the end it chased him all the way. Yamagami mumbled that he then thought the man had turned the other way, and so the man ran until he reached the foot of the mountain where his village was visible. The man approached Minato and said quietly that it was probably a wolf from Japanese folklore. The man said with a smile that the place where he was lost was quite far away from where Minato had gone up to. Yamagami was angry that the man thought he was a monster. The man said that even if that dog was a monster, it didn't change the fact that he had help. He revealed that he calls that dog Inu out of gratitude. He then explained that there was a statue of Jizo in the place where he got lost, and he goes there quite often to put his manju and say thank you. Minato mumbled that he would like to meet that dog someday. He took the bag and said goodbye to the man. As they left, Yamagami said that he was glad that the man was feeling better because his internal organs were damaged and he could no longer eat his favorite fried food. He felt depressed. Yamagami mumbled that even God can't bypass the law of human death. Suddenly, a young guy with a bag over his shoulder ran past the guys. It turned out to be the salesman's grandson. He He apologized for his tardiness, but the man replied that it wasn't worth the trouble because club activities were much more important. Yamagami looked at them and said that there would be trouble if he retired without putting the next generation on their feet. It was a normal fall day. Yamagami was sound asleep as usual and Minato was busy sitting at his desk. The boy put down his brush and admired his new notes. He called Yamagami over to appreciate his efforts. He asked Yamagami what he thought of them. He corrected him and said it wasn't a turtle, but the spirit of a turtle. Yamagami admitted that there was a tremendous amount of power felt in them, so they would last him much longer than the previous ones. Minato realized that the quality was better because of the brush. Yamagami asked the guy to give him a piece of paper with his name and ink. Minato did so. Yamagami dipped his paw in the ink and then left his imprint on the paper where Minato had written his name. The guy said it looked cute and the dog explained that it was his prayer for safety. Minato laughed and said that Harima would probably faint when he got a talisman like that. Minato was right, for when Harima took these talismans in his hands, he was stunned. Minato asked the man to come to his senses. Harima apologized for his behavior, explaining that it was a very powerful talisman, so he was so surprised that he fainted. Minato told the man that he could dispose of these talismans as he wished. Harima bowed to the guy many times and thanked him for doing such a good job. Minato asked the man if it was the season of musical pendants. Harima replied that it was not. However, for Harima, a musical pendant is very expensive. Harima left. Minato went outside and stretched and then asked Yamagami if he would like some sweets. The man replied that there was no need to even ask that since he was always in favor. Suddenly a groundhog named Uzagi jumped on Minato out of nowhere, and along with him came groundhogs named Seri and Torika. Minato was happy to see them and asked how they were doing. The groundhogs said they were doing great and they noticed that the guy hadn't changed at all. They explained to Minato that they had come today not just for fun, but with a small gift, and showed him a basket with a mountain filled with various fruits. They explained that they really wanted to show their concern, as Yamagami had always been kind to them. Minato was surprised that there was so much fruit. Minato thanked the animals sincerely and invited them to eat the fruit along with the sweets. As they ate, Minato asked the marmots if they had been practicing. Minato explained to them that he felt they were much stronger than they were before. The marmosets were pleased that their efforts had not been in vain. The marmots asked Minato if they had become like the mountain god, and the boy replied that they had become more like him. The animals were very happy. One of the marmots asked Minato if he could have another yummy treat as a reward. The guy allowed it. All the animals happily gobbled the fruit and sweets. One of the marmots noticed Minato's strange behavior and asked what was wrong. Minato admitted that he was concerned about the camphor tree that had stopped growing. They looked at the tree, which looked very sparse. Minato was upset that it had stopped growing. Minato said he didn't think the tree was sick, but at some point it stopped growing even though he watered it every day. The groundhog examined the tree and said that he didn't see any problems, but it was a sacred tree, so it was growing differently than normal trees. The groundhog said that the tree is still thin, so he can't climb it. Suddenly Minato was touched by a turtle named Kame. The groundhog heard a sound outside the gate with the edge of his ear and realized that they most likely had visitors. The turtle pointed his paw at the gate, and there he could see the silhouette of a guest arriving. Minato opened the door a little and thought a snake had come to visit. However, when he opened the door, he saw a small dragon in front of him. The boy thanked him for coming. The dragon flew past Minato and sat down next to Kame and started talking. The guy was madly surprised that they were friends, however it was very much like Kame. Groundhog revealed that the dragon's name was Oryu. Groundhog revealed that it was one of the 4 spirits. The dragon pointed a finger at Minato, wanting to know his permissions. The boy wondered what the dragon needed his permission for. Minato answered him that if Yamagami was okay with it, he was okay with it too. The dragon nodded his head. Suddenly he flew up above the ground and started circling above the guys, flapping his beautiful wings. And after a moment, rain clouds began to form in the sky. A torrential downpour came, which the sacred tree needed so badly, and right in front of his eyes the tree began to grow at a great speed. It became several times taller than the guy. Minato looked up and couldn't believe that in front of him was his sacred tree, which wasn't looking so good even in the morning. Serki and Minato looked in amazement at the camphor tree that had grown in size so quickly. The dragon had returned from the sky. Groundhog explained to Minato that the dragon wanted to live in the pond. The boy replied that he certainly didn't mind, especially if Kame wanted it. The dragon and the turtle looked at each other and nodded their heads. The dragon was happy. He had long dreamed of living in the pond with Kame. Oryu took the large glass of drink in his small clawed paws and took a sip. After swallowing a large amount of drink, the dragonkin blushed and hiccuped loudly. Oryu-san turned out to be a big fan of wine. When he got drunk, he flew through the air in a good mood. The protagonist thought he was quite cute. For a long time his body was possessed by a vengeful spirit. The one who banished it was a Harima. He banished it with a seal on his hand. Yamagami-san said that the dragon was grateful to him. Minato thought that Harima was the one who helped him. At least he thought so. Kami-san and Oryu-san were good friends. Now their pond was also revitalized. The hero enjoyed watching all this. When Minato got out of the bath, he wiped his head with a towel and thought it had taken him quite a while. Yamagami-san didn't think it was a bad thing. Most likely, the reason was simply because of the water. The hero knew that Yamagami had a weakness for fonts. His way of talking reminded him of his late grandfather. Grandpa had once offered the guy ice cream. He hoped that Minato liked the caramel flavor. His parents' house was located at the hot springs. It was possible to take baths there every day, but it was too difficult for one person. Yamagami assumed that the hero missed the hot springs. Sometimes that was indeed the case. The hero said that they had a sulfur spring that had the effect of restoring the body. When he left his parents' home, he had to find another way to get rid of his fatigue. As he was telling this, a wonderful thought came into the heads of the divine beasts. After a while, the boy returned to the backyard where he saw Yamagami. Yamagami was lying in a hot spring, and thick steam was coming from the water. Minato walked a little closer and smelled the very same sulfur odor. The hero dipped his hands into the water and exclaimed in surprise that it was that very real spring. Yamagami smirked and suggested that the guy enjoy the spring. He would surely enjoy it. Minato blushed with pleasure as he undressed and climbed into the hot spring. He thanked Yamagami for such a gift. Minato thought it was great and Yamagami agreed with him. After a while, the interested little children of the Yamagami approached them. They wanted to know if the hot springs were really that beneficial. Minato smiled and invited them to join them. The marmots jumped into the spring. It really relaxed them. One of the marmots started splashing happily like a child, while one of the marmots energetically swam not the first lap around the spring. All the others were quietly and peacefully enjoying the bath. The hero told the Yamagami that these hot springs were luxurious. Hot water was indeed a luxury for people. The guy recalled that the former owner of the house was the president of the company, but that wasn't accurate. Minato rinsed his face and said that he was getting too hot. He was worried about Kame-sana and Oryu-sana and asked God about them. Yamagami replied that most likely they were in the pond. No wonder they were there since they had been drinking late last night. One of Yamagami's children told Minato that this spring was created by Oryu, Yamagami, and Kame-san. The hero replied that he was sure to thank them with sweets and good drink. After the hot springs, Minato barely got out of the water and collapsed on the floor. The groundhog waved a small fan in front of the hero's face. He hoped the guy was alright. Minato's face turned red. He closed his eyes and said quietly that he was completely exhausted. After his bath, Minato happily drank a bottle of soda and took a deep breath. While he and Yamagami were resting on the porch, one of the marmots fell from the tree onto its back with a rumble. It turned out to be Usagi. His back was hurting badly and the hero wanted to make sure he was okay. Instead of answering the question, Usagi told Minato that he needed to prepare himself. It was like they had a customer. Yamagami and Minato glanced at each other. The dragon along with the turtle leisurely approached Minato. Minato thought they looked sleepy and assumed that the spirits had come to say hello to him. The dragon and turtle looked at each other with the same sleepy eyes. The hero asked the marmots about the client. He wondered who would come to them this time. The first thing the guy saw was two small hooves peeking out from behind the doorway. There was a slightly dark aura emanating from the creature, and it appeared to be wary. Minato immediately recognized the same baby dragon he had met earlier. The hero approached the baby to inquire about its business, but the dragon was scared of him and quickly jumped into the bushes. Minato looked into the bushes in surprise and saw the creature crouched on the ground and shaking with fright. Minato assumed he must have done something, but he didn't understand anything. The dragon along with the turtle only sighed heavily. Minato waited for his spirits to speak to the frightened beast. Apparently they said he had nothing to fear and soon the frightened spirit poked its head out of the bushes. The groundhog asked permission to enter the house and the hero replied that he did not mind. Along with him he asked the little boy to enter. As soon as he looked at him, the toddler's body shook again. Still, the hero didn't understand why he was so fearful. The little dragonkin was late with his greeting and decided to introduce himself, and thanked the guy for his rescue and introduced himself with the name Kieran. Minato was glad to know his real name. As soon as he spoke to Kieran again, the little guy turned pale with fright. The hero saw that the dragon was frightened and thought he had said something wrong again. Through his fright, Kieran said that he was very grateful to him for freeing him from the evil spirit that day. He couldn't thank him properly. He even struggled to utter the words of gratitude. He had done extremely stupid things such as running away. He felt very sorry. At the time when the hero destroyed the evil Kieran with his power, he felt over the moon, but in return he behaved miserably. All these useless days he was very agitated and felt uncomfortable. Minato didn't understand at all what he was talking about. The dragon asked him to understand him properly. He was in shock then and couldn't thank him properly, so he would like to thank him now. 15 minutes later, they finally had a normal conversation with Minato. Kieran thought it was just a wonderful house and there was even a hot spring in the garden. It looked comfortable and he was kindly envious of them. At the moment, Kieran was wandering around like a plant without roots and hadn't had a bath in a long time. It seemed to Minato that he was very reminiscent of Taro Urashima. While the groundhog translated every word of the Kieran, Minato only waited for it all to end. Finally, after 20 minutes, when the groundhogs were already asleep, the dragon said that he would like to give Minato a small gift. Minato could not believe that he had finally finished. Kieran believed that Minato would own half of the world and he would make him the ruler. Actually, that was his gift to the guy. The hero frowned and said he didn't need it. His refusal shocked the Kieran. Kieran again hid behind the tree scared and didn't understand why Minato refused his offer. Minato replied that he was not that kind of person and it was enough that he was fine now. The dragon thought it was all foolishness, because it wasn't enough for humans to just compete for Earth's resources. They destroyed entire races and enjoyed when they killed their own kind. Kieran thought humans were superficial and cruel creatures. Minato didn't understand what he was saying. The dragon said that if he took over, he could kill his own kind as much as he wanted. Minato replied that he was not like that. Hosek and the Raijin that were sitting in the same tree advised not to even try to change the guy's mind. People had their pros and cons, but this kid didn't understand many things yet. If he owned half the world, it didn't mean he would be happy. The hero only now saw Mr. Hosek and the Raijin in the tree. The lad bowed over the spirits and thanked them for such words. Thanks to the two of them, the dragon finally returned to its home. The boys replied to Minato that Kieran was a pain in the ass. They thought there was nothing wrong with Kieran. In the past, that child needed many things. Minato thought that something had happened to him, for he was very scared when he saw him. Hosek and the Raijin couldn't order people to be kinder to him, but they thought it was useless, for it was the dragon that had always hated humans. Perhaps the deciding factor was being captured by an evil spirit. Minato wanted to know about the bodies of the boys, the fact that they hadn't grown a bit in all this time, and the Hosek and Raijin smiled. Looking at his hand, one of them said that their bodies were returning to their original shape and it was all thanks to Minato. They recognized that they existed and began to respect them. Their existence was strengthened and they could now use most of their power. Hosek and the Raijin thanked Minato for his help. They recalled that they had to give something to Minato, but the hero didn't understand what they were talking about. Somehow, from a small bag, one of the spirits pulled out a huge swordfish. It was their gift. Hosek couldn't wait to give it to the hero. The marmosets and Minato stared at the fish in shock, clearly not expecting this. Minato asked the guys what it was, and the spirits replied that it was a swordfish that they had already drained all the blood out of. Minato was grateful to them for such a gift, but he didn't know what to do with it. Hosek asked for literally a minute. He chopped the fish into pieces right in the air and asked to enjoy the dish. The groundhogs were absolutely delighted. They thought that Minato could do that too. But Minato replied that maybe someday he could do that too. Once when Yamagami fell ill, the hero, under the guidance of the Hosek, attempted to use magic on the god. Hosek said that to some extent he had it under control. But at some point, Yamagami abruptly sneezed right on Minato's hand. Minato apologized to him. It seemed to Hazaka that the hero was holding back his power and asked him not to be afraid. Once he uses the power to its fullest, he would recognize his limits and be able to control it more freely. For example, he could try to deflate someone he didn't like. It was necessary to listen to his heart. The hero replied that he didn't have such a person at the moment. When the hero was here, he did not need to worry about such things, and his heart was completely calm. But he realized that it wouldn't always be such carefree days here. He needed to fully control the force in case of an emergency, and needed to be prepared for everything. Minato wanted to try and work harder. Hosek smiled and agreed with him, saying that he should have cut those who were not to his liking. The boy frowned and said it was too dangerous. The god offered to give him the power and then he would surely kill him with one blow. Minato exclaimed that they were saying two creepy things. Yamagami got to his feet and motioned for the boy to follow him. The hero didn't realize where they were going, but Yamagami just asked to follow him. Once they reached the back gate, the hero thought that someone would visit them again. but the god asked to just open it. Minato listened to his request and carefully opened the door. To his surprise, the door did not lead outside at all, but somewhere deep into the forest. Minato couldn't believe his eyes and didn't understand how this could be real. He looked back and forth at the forest and back and forth at Yamagami, asking how this was possible. God replied that it was a sacred place created by the followers. The hero felt a little strange being here. He felt kind of creepy. God didn't understand what was making him feel uncomfortable and said that they had a long way to go. Yamagami looked around and said that this was a pretty big place. The hero could agree with him, though he was unsure of the place. The god replied that everything here was artificially created and you could cut everything into pieces as much as you wanted. Minato could use all his power here. Minato looked around and realized that he couldn't hurt anyone here. The guy raised his hand and focused on his power. Everything around him began to surge with wind. The guy's body took on a light color. As the Minato concentrated, he tried to fully release his power. After releasing it, his body was covered solidly in a dazzling ball of light. While the hero was in training, a Kieran dropped by his house. The dragon cautiously peeked into their courtyard and thought that in all likelihood, the landlord was not at home. Kieran speculated that he had probably gone to hunt for people's heads or decided to reclaim someone else's land. He could bet that the hero had killed all of his family members. Besides, he would not have been able to argue his Japanese blood. Still, and Kieran remembered that he had forgotten to give him the gift as a thank you and decided to just leave it there. Now he could walk back out with peace of mind. Kieran left a fruit called durian on the porch, which exuded a rotten odor. Suddenly, Kieran heard a splash of water behind him and turned sharply. A turtle attacked him, but the dragon dodged sideways from its blow. Kieran noticed the Oryu along with the turtle and asked what they were doing. The turtle was able to ask him the same counter question. The spirits did not understand why he had brought his stinking garbage here. The dragon remarked that he was being impolite, for it was a very tasty fruit. The tortoise disdainfully threw the fruit on the ground. His eyes narrowed, whereupon the turtle said that something like that couldn't be with food. Kieran couldn't believe that they weren't familiar with such a delicious fruit and decided that they were too limited in their knowledge. Oryu asked not to piss them off and take his fruit back. The turtle threw the fruit to Kieran and thought he just didn't have a nose. As soon as the fruit fell into Oryu's paws, its spikes dug into his claw, which the dragon didn't like. Oryu looked at his paws in horror and said that now his claws had this dirt on them that smelled terrible. The turtle also tried to cover his nose from that horrible stench. Kieran once again told them that it was fruit, not garbage. Because they were only sitting at home, they had limited knowledge. They should have traveled the world and learned more about such things according to Kieran. The dragon and turtle still insisted and ordered them to take him with them quickly. Kieran still had to take his fruit away, but he still insisted that it was delicious. The turtle told the Oryu that their garden was now dirty and needed to be cleaned. They needed to hurry before the Minato arrived. Oryu wished it would rain. During that time, the hero had grown so weary in his training that Yamagami had to carry him on his back home. Up to now the boy had been in a blackout. Yamagami didn't think it was possible to get used to it so easily. Back on the way back, Yamagami thought that everything seemed to be fine, but for some reason he could smell some faint odor. Meanwhile, the Oryu along with the turtle were resting in the hot springs. After a while, the hero tried out his skills again away from home. The marmots were delighted with his new abilities and kept their eyes on the lad. His new skill was able to damage a large tree. The marmots responded that he had done quite well and suggested that he had gotten stronger. He no longer fainted and his strength had increased, yet he was still far from perfect. The hero smiled and said that this sacred place was amazing. It looked more natural than he had expected, but it was not at all different from a real forest. Groundhog smiled and said it was cool. Yamagami suggested they call it a day, and the hero suggested they go home in that case. The god realized that if he used more strength than he should, he would faint again. As soon as the hero passed through the portal and came back out, he heard his phone ringing in his pocket. It turned out to be a message from his mother. The sign was badly damaged, so she asked for a new one to be created for her. The boy thought it was strange that the sign was broken, so he asked the Yamagami's opinion. This was a common thing in their house, and sometimes even the neighbors gossiped about it. The hero exhaled heavily and said that his mother was just exaggerating. He was sure that there was only a small crack. Yamagami hesitated and said that in his opinion, it wasn't like that. The hero didn't understand what he meant. It seemed to Yamagami that there was someone living in that house, and it was something inhuman. The hero assumed that he was talking about Grandpa. It could only mean that the effect had already passed. The boy looked thoughtfully at the plaque and thought that his father still hadn't recovered. The hero recalled the events of long ago. Unfortunately, he was right in the past. The doctors could not find the cause of his relative's illness in any way. If this was going to continue, it would be better to close the inn for a while. The boy glanced questioningly at the sign that had fallen down again. Despite the staff doing their best, it still kept falling off and the hero decided to reattach it later. Suddenly, right in front of the hero and the woman's nose, the sign shattered into splinters. Now it seemed that after Grandpa died, the hero had no one to communicate with at all. The woman hoped that the Minato was not hurt by the plaque. Meanwhile, the hero assumed that Grandpa was upset. In other words, it was Grandpa's anger fist. Yamagami didn't understand what Minato was telling him. The guy felt that they had to get to work. After they replaced the plaque, Dad went on the mend. The first plaque he made then made a lasting impression on Mom. For this reason, the hero was disturbed when she made a fuss over the plaque. Thanks to her, peace reigned in his family home. Minato looked at the clear sky and thought he should have sent as an offering of sweets. Meanwhile, Kieran was frantically peeking at the hero and thought he had done a rather scary thing. He was pretty sure that the hero was planning to stab everyone with this thing, but it was too short. It meant that he would aim at a specific point, such as the eyeball. His movements were like a professional's, and Kieran had no doubt that he wanted to kill more than just his race. Kieran hoped that this could calm him down and placed a rambutan under the gate of the house. Contrary to its appearance, this fruit was very sweet and it was native to Southeast Asia. After that, Kieran quickly ran away. After a while, the marmots discovered the fruit and brought it to Minato, saying that someone had left them in front of the gate. The hero had no doubt that Kieran had left them, so it didn't seem to him that someone was watching him last time. The boy would have been grateful to the dragon for bringing him rare fruits, but the current situation was hurting him. The hero didn't know what the fruit was and offered to try it later. One of the marmots sighed heavily and said that he just wanted to give it to him personally. Yamagami smiled and said that the hero was really a fun guy. Yamagami's kids noticed that Minato had cut out the nameplate. The hero replied that he would send it to his parents. Due to the fact that he had undergone training, the nameplates became more effective. The hero took one of the nameplates and looked at it with a smile. He hoped that the marmots were right about that. When the mother received the plaque from Minato, she immediately hung it outside her house. In the same way, the Minato also gave his grandfather the sweets that had mysteriously disappeared from his saucer. It took a while until Minato learned to fully control his power. Under Yamagami's supervision, he channeled the power of the wind towards the tree. With his new skill, he neatly chopped the tree into small branches. The hero himself was surprised by his skill and Pitts admitted that it was not bad. In the end, only bare trunks were left of the trees. The guy stretched his arm and said that he was already used to this power. In addition, his body became lighter, which meant that it was easier to do it. And it was all thanks to Rajan-san. The guy cooked a delicious dish on the grill. It was seafood and a large oyster. He handed portions of Usagi with Torika and asked me to take it to her. While the hero cooked various delicious things, the marmots worked as waiters and handed out plates to the divine beasts. While cooking, a Hazuki approached Minato and asked about his business. The guy smiled and replied that the next batch would be ready soon. This time he would serve them scallops and fish, but that wasn't what the god was talking about. While pouring sauce over the fish, the god asked about his training. The lad replied that they were not going well, but there was nothing that could be done about it. Hazuki wanted to give the plate to his brother, but apparently he wanted the fish without the sauce. One of the brothers suggested that the Minato should have given his power, but the other didn't understand what it was for. The brother thought it was better to focus on controlling the wind. He gave the Yamagami his plate of tucked fish and asked for a substitute for that. Yamagami smelled the fish with sauce and thought that if this sauce was added, then the flavor of the ingredients would be lost. Yet this kind of fish was also very tasty. While cooking, Minato grabbed his right shoulder with a sharp pain. Hazuki offered something to the guy and touched his neck. At the same moment, Minato felt a bolt of lightning run through his body. At first he felt a sudden attack, but then he realized that his pain had stopped. He squeezed his hand and thought it was cool. The thunder god was worried that he was not doing well. His whole body ached because he was using the power of the wind. But the power of the wind was hard to curb. The thunder god said that now the hero felt lightness. Minato made a couple of sharp movements with his right hand and exclaimed that it was really easy for him. Just like the wind god said, he needed to concentrate on training, but he shouldn't have been in a hurry. He needed to do things gradually. After the helpful advice, the brothers asked him to put more scallops for them. Minato's strength didn't look as cool as Hazuki-san's so far. Still, he felt that it was a much more proper way to use the power. With those words, the hero cut some more trees and turned them into small logs. Yamagami smirked and told the guy that he was creating his own path. Now that he had a better command of his power, perhaps it was time to finish his training. Yamagami suggested making this the final test. The hero along with Yamagami looked at the distant mountains. The mountain in front of Minato looked rather small compared to Yamagami. He needed to cut down all the trees. The hero doubted that he could do it. Besides, he thought this mountain was far from small. Yamagami ordered him to start, and the guy understood everything. Minato diligently began cutting each of the trees. Gradually, the mountain of branches on which the god lay began to grow. When the guy finished, the entire field where they were standing was covered with mountains of branches. Looking at the leaves, Yamagami's drool began to run, but the hero asked him to wait a bit. The hero replied that he wasn't ready yet, and the god understood that. The smell of fried sweet potatoes was incredible. While they were cooking, the guys heard some noise behind them and looked around. To their surprise, it was a Kieran who had apparently fallen asleep. Yamagami noticed that it was a vengeful spirit. Apparently, the Kieran had been infected somewhere and needed to exorcise the spirit as quickly as possible. But the hero realized that if he got any closer, it could escape again. Minato wrote a note and gave it to Yamagami to give to Kieran. It was a magical note that when contacted by the Kieran freed him from the evil spirit. Kieran sadly lowered his head and said that he was terribly ashamed. He wanted to deliver something else to them today. It was a star fruit native to tropical Asia, also known as carambola. The hero looked at the fleeing dragon and said that he had visited them too often, and he felt like he wanted to stay here forever. Minato felt that they would soon become closer with him. Yamagami prompted the boy that the Kieran liked beer. Every divine beast had its own cravings. While cooking hot potatoes, the guy thought about it. While eating the potatoes in both cheeks, Yamagami offered to buy them beer tomorrow. One morning, the hero deliberately opened a can of beer and defiantly poured it into a glass. He had already noticed the Kieran peering cautiously out of a nearby tree. The dragon was so eager to drink that mug that his little hooves clawed into the tree trunk. Minato purposely placed the mug on the nearest ledge. Eventually, the Kieran couldn't stand it and rushed towards the cup. He happily drank the entire glass in one gulp, not even noticing the thick beer foam on his lips. Minato thought it was a little too easy. They had made a successful capture of the Kieran, even though Oryu and the turtle didn't like it. After this incident, Kieran started spending time in the garden. He spent most of his time in the shade of a comfortable tree or on the bridge and enjoyed a beer, and socialized with Kame and Oryu. As always, he examined the hero with a piercing stare, but Minato saw nothing wrong with that. Now he didn't run away when the hero approached him, and that pleased him. But still, Kieran couldn't stop traveling. He often went traveling and always brought back different fruits. Once he brought the hero a pidea. Thus, their peaceful days continued to go on. When Kieran treated the guy with pidea, someone suddenly rang the gate of the house. Kieran was frightened, and Minato assumed it was Zaruma-san. It seemed to him that this time there would be a manju with sake. Yamagami agreed with him, and the groundhog exclaimed that their cookies were the best. Kieran, meanwhile, was already hiding in the bushes. The hero greeted the Harima-san, but noticed that the man looked kind of tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. Even so, he brought them a bunch of gifts. There were so many that the divine beasts, including the Minato, couldn't believe their eyes. The guy took one of the bottles in shock and said that he kind of didn't ask for such a thing. He looked questioningly at Harima-san. Harima-san knelt down and admitted that he would like to ask for something. Minato seemed like he had something going on and said he would do whatever he could. Yamagami replied that when there were an awful lot of sweets, the odors mixed and it was hard to smell them. He couldn't enjoy the western sweets, which he didn't like. The divine beasts did not like this. They considered Harima to be shameless and it pissed them off. Minato would ask them to keep their voices down and knelt down opposite the guest. Harima wanted to be brief and said that he would like to ask Minato to destroy the vengeful spirit. He realized that they, the Omeji, had to deal with the matter themselves. The problem was that this place was another dimension, so he asked the Minato to do so. Harima corrected his sliding glasses. The other dimension was a place beyond human logic. One could even say that it was similar to this garden. The hero was precisely the one who was allowed to reside here. It was originally a doll that was brought to the temple to exorcise unclean powers. The person who was in charge of the exorcism passed away while praying, and every day the vengeful spirit in the doll grew stronger. By the time he realized this, the vengeful spirit had become very powerful. This was the reason why Harima felt so bad and the others could not even go near that place. Most likely this vengeful spirit was the fallen god. Harima assumed that the place was created for a god, but it had been defiled. Normally only those with permission could enter the sacred area, but if it was a Minato, they would have no problem. Judging from Yamagami's appearance, he was very angry about this request. Yamagami stood up to his full height in front of Harima and bared his fangs. He said that the latter had relied too much on his strength, and he shouldn't have gotten carried away with it. His appearance made even Minato frightened. He wanted to reassure Yamagami and hesitantly called out to him. Groundhogs crouched on his father's head and told Yamagami that he was overdoing it. Even if he wanted to make him think about how it looked from the outside, it was too much. Yamagami had frightened this man, and thus clearly didn't want to keep getting candy from him. Yamagami understood them and agreed. Harima almost fell to the ground and Minato rushed to his aid. He hoped that Harima was alright. Tsuki had brought Yamagami back to normal and he looked better now. Yamagami assumed he looked creepy when he looked down at him. Minato suggested that he could get in if he had Yamagami's power. Yamagami agreed. After all, he was the god of the mountain. The hero hoped that the god would share his power with him, but Yamagami suggested he'd better please that guy. The god thought that he had apparently been very rude to him. Minato approached the Harima-san and said that Yamagami would help him. Harima was overjoyed and thanked them profusely for their help. After tasting one of the treats, Yamagami had no doubt that it was a paste made from strained beans. The hero was curious about the silver-wrapped sweet. It turned out to be mochi with red beans. The hero offered to savor and treat himself to these modi. He called out the Harima-san and offered to join them. But as soon as the lad looked inside the room, he saw that the Harima had already fallen asleep. The groundhog looked at the Harima in surprise and the hero asked them to be quiet. They carefully covered the Harima with a plaid and let him rest for a while in their cozy garden. While Harima was restlessly sleeping, the Kieran eyed him suspiciously and kept his eyes on him. At one point, the man suddenly jumped up, and the Kieran hid behind a tree. It seemed to Minato that the Harima was already awake. The man thought it was surprising that he had fallen asleep, but it was still a good thing. Even though he was tired, falling asleep as a guest was his mistake. Harima admitted that he was very sorry. The man thought that he had caused the guy too much trouble, but the Minato only smiled back. Kieran didn't understand how this man could stay sane in this garden and realized that he was an unusual person at all. In response, the Kame only offered to come closer to him and find out if he was so curious. Kieran narrowed his eyes and said that he didn't like him. Minato escorted the Harima out and the man promised to give him the details. The man was very sorry that Minato had to do this. Minato asked to stop apologizing so often. Besides, he was greatly indebted to Harima. Harima smiled and said that he really couldn't thank him enough. The hero asked the beasts to prepare a large number of amulets and get down to business. Seeing a large stack of papers, the groundhog assumed that the hero would be working. Powerful amulets couldn't be created instantly, so he thought he should prepare now. The guy picked up an ink brush and thought about it. This time it wasn't at all a shopping list for Harima-sama or anything like that. He didn't even know what to write to him. Tsuki suggested writing to him to make the unclean spirit go away. That sounded pretty cool. They also suggested writing about fresh baked goods and cookies. One could ask for the gift of power to exorcise them. The marmots talked about something offhand, like strawberries and chestnuts. While the hero was writing, his phone rang. Just then he got a message from Harima-sana. He wrote about a place 6 days away and described a location outside the prefecture. Minato said it was pretty far away. Manaka with salted red beans was a famous sweet. Yamagami read it in a special edition of the candy. The hero realized everything and promised to buy this candy from Yamagami. The turtle hinted that the local sake there was also very tasty. The hero thought that Yamagami-san would also go with him. The guy almost dropped his phone from his hands when he found out that Yamagami wasn't actually going. The hero thought he had to enter the divine temple with the Yamagami-san, but his children asked him not to worry. On behalf of the Yamagami, they would accompany him on this journey. Yamagami yawned tiredly and said that he was too lazy to walk that far, so these guys would be enough. The groundhogs recalled that they were the descendants of the mountain god. Besides, the mountain god was by nature immobile. Yamagami turned to his children and offered to show him the results of their training. After a while, the hero made many blanks on paper. Gathering all his belongings, Minato exclaimed that he was completely ready. The marmots were surprised that Minato had stuffed literally all of his pockets with writing. They were afraid that they would fall apart or that Minato would have a hard time moving. The boy scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously. It was hard, but he thought it was best to be reassured. Still, he decided it was best to move them. One of the marmots saw that the guy was nervous and asked him a question. He hoped he was alright. Minato was very tense, but replied that he was fine. It was another dimension where the tainted deity promotes. He looked at his two papers, one of which said parfait and the other one said cookies. When he thought about it, he felt uneasy. The marmots mussed the boy's hair and replied that she would be alright, for they were with him. One of them suggested that he should get the matter over with quickly and go out to buy candy. Minato looked back at them and smiled. He agreed with them and admitted that he was very glad of their company. We needed to get this over with as soon as possible, and it was time to hit the road. Before leaving, the hero asked Yamagami to stay like this for a while longer. Yamagami smiled and asked the guy to be extremely careful. After that, the confident hero walked with the marmots outside the garden and hit the road. On the way, the bag seemed very heavy to Minato, and he finally reached his limit. The tired guy couldn't banish his thoughts and only thought of the evil banished spirits. The guys noticed that Minato had turned pale and wanted to make sure he was alright. The guy smiled and replied that he was fine. Minato was shocked when he noticed that his groundhogs had shrunk in size. One of them admitted that she had used up all her strength and apologized. Her brother asked not to worry as he would be back to normal after eating a cupcake. The hero thought they had saved him. He thought they looked pretty small and cute now. One of the marmots replied that she had borrowed the power of a mountain god. He had remotely transferred his divine power to her, but they were having trouble fighting on their own. Minato suggested that all the mountain gods fought among themselves. Serki replied that he was a wolf after all, but this was the first time any of the Yamagami children had heard of such a thing. Serki asked Minato how many talismans he had left. The kid frantically started fumbling in his pockets and realized they were empty. The marmots thought they were in trouble, but Minato thought they had banished all the evil spirits. In fact, the marmots were sorry to say that. They had one last matter they hadn't dealt with yet. One of the marmots pointed her finger at the entrance of the building. There was the dark core that formed this other dimension. The groundhog looked at the contents of the bag and asked Minato about it. Minato replied that it temporarily sealed the power of the talismans and gave it to him before Harima left. The guys took out the notebooks from his bag and said that he could still write in it. It seems that once the exorcism powers on the paper were expelled, it couldn't be reused. Minato wrote a word on each page of this notebook, but they disappeared. Even if he rewrote them, they would no longer be a talisman, meaning there was nothing left to write on. And that was sad. The groundhog thought of something and offered to look at it. In his paws was a large leaf of wood. But it wasn't just any leaf, it was a camphor leaf. The hero didn't understand where they got the leaf of the sacred tree from. The Marmot sister didn't understand why she hadn't noticed this divine spirit before, but it didn't matter now. She said that if the hero wrote on it, it should have worked and hoped that Minato could have written on it. The hero decided to give it a try and picked up the brush. As soon as he started writing on the leaf, a wind rose up around him. The guy noticed that his hands were completely exhausted, but a little more and all the remaining strength he could put into this talisman. Minato became exhausted and fell to one knee, thus scaring the guys. They called out to the guy, but the hero replied that he was fine. It seems they made the strongest talisman and the hero showed them a leaf with the symbol. The Marmots agreed with him and offered to finish it. After that they went inside the building. Right at the entrance, a black blot like paint formed on the wall of the building. Groundhog pointed at it and said that was it. The boy walked over to the foul thing and held up a sheet with a symbol on it. Thanks to the leaf, the black spot began to glow with a bright light. But Minato didn't realize what was happening. Eventually, a ball of light formed from the black blot. This light seemed very familiar to him. It reminded him of a turtle or a Kieran. Suddenly, the hero heard a noise and looked around. The groundhogs noticed that the other dimension had started to collapse because it had lost its core. They had to run away from this place as fast as possible. The boy grabbed the ball of light and ran out of the house with the marmots. What he saw outside was quite amazing. The hero raised his head and noticed how literally the whole space began to shatter into shards like a mirror. The marmots were scared and didn't understand why this was happening. The hole they had made was starting to close. The Yamagami children were confused and didn't understand what to do. They started to worry about not being able to get out, but the hero asked them to calm down. The marmots called out to Minato and warned him that a piece of shrapnel was flying behind him. They asked him to be more careful and run away. At the last moment, the boy covered his eyes and ducked to the ground. At the same moment, a great thunder sounded, followed by a lightning strike. The strong and terrible lightning struck directly into the roof of the building. It turned out to be none other than the god of thunder and wind. They did not know the place, but it seemed oppressive to them. The gods burned down the building and deigned to leave immediately. They hoped they could do so. The brothers rushed to Minato's aid and prevented him from falling to the ground. Apparently, the hero was so exhausted and tired that he passed out again. The gods grinned, noting that Minato had no talismans left.